Chapter 835. Martial artists below the soul-tempering stage would practice some footwork and movement techniques to assist in battle. However, Ji Tianqing had only practiced the shadowless steps, and he had practiced it a long time ago. Ever since he reached the sky origin stage, he had never used it again. Although the combat technique he had just come up with was simple and crude, it was much better than the shadowless steps. I learned this combat technique from the burial of heaven. Since that is the case, I will name it Sword-Soul Combat Technique. Although I am still at the stage of learning, and the Sword-Soul Combat Technique is only in its infancy, I will continue to practice it. However, if I continue to train and try, I will definitely be able to perfect the Sword-Soul Battle Technique and make it my own battle technique. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind as he decided on a name for his combat technique. He raised his head and looked at the third prince, who was standing proudly on the altar. He sneered and said, "Third prince, your so-called 10,000 gu realm is just as so. So what if you can control the power of heaven and earth? You can't do anything to me, can you? You must be very angry that your 2 attacks missed, right?" The third prince was very angry. He was burning with anger, and his face was as cold as ice. He looked down at Ji Tianqing and shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing, that was just the appetizer. Now, I will show you the true power of the 10,000 gu realm. I will let you be proud for a while. Soon, I will make you cry." As he finished speaking, he waved his hands and used a spell to control the power of the 10,000 gu origin. Suddenly, the colorful altar, which was hundreds of meters tall, released thousands of blue flames. They poured down like rain from the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. At least 8 million dark blue flames poured down like raindrops, enveloping the sky within 100 miles. Each blue flame was only the size of a palm. They quickly condensed into a thumb-sized blue beetle and flew toward Ji Tianqing. Although the beetle was small, it looked ferocious. Their bodies were like locusts, but their tails were like scorpions, and their bodies were covered with sharp spikes. The scariest thing was that the beetle's head looked like a ghost's face, and it had 4 white fangs. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of Yin Ghost Gu." The third prince waved his sleeves and roared with a ferocious expression. Suddenly, the blue beetles that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rushed towards Ji Tianqing like a swarm of locusts. Every Yin Ghost Gu carried an eerie aura of death, as if they were malicious ghosts from the netherworld. Their speed was as fast as light. Their ghastly faces were ghastly as they opened their mouths full of sharp teeth, wanting to bite Ji Tianqing's flesh and soul. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's expression changed and he cursed, "Despicable." There were too many Yin Ghost Gu, they were densely packed and covered the sky, making it impossible for him to dodge. The sword-soul battle technique that he had just created had also lost its usefulness. Buzz 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 buzz. In the blink of an eye, the dark ghost Gu that descended from the sky engulfed his figure. He subconsciously activated his primeval essence and condensed an Earth Emperor shield, bursting out with thousands of sword chi, shooting in all directions. Swish swish swish. Thousands of chopstick-length golden sword chi burst out with unparalleled sharpness, stabbing into the surrounding Yin Ghost Gu. Those Yin Ghost Gu screeched as they were hit by the sword chi, and were sent flying back. However, their dark blue carapaces had extremely strong defensive power, blocking the sword chi's power. After flying 1,000 meters away, they flew back without any injuries, and charged towards Ji Tianqing even more crazily. Boom boom boom. Tens of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu charged towards Ji Tianqing without fear of death, crashing into the dark yellow Earth Emperor shield and letting out a series of muffled sounds. The Earth Emperor shield with extremely strong defensive power could not withstand the continuous attacks of countless Yin Ghost Gu, and cracks started to appear on it. Immediately after, those Yin Ghost Gu were like maggots, wrapping around Ji Tianqing's body and crazily biting the Earth Emperor shield. Kacha kacha. Following a crisp cracking sound, the Earth Emperor shield was bitten full of holes in a blink of an eye. Heavens, what the hell is this? Even the Earth Emperor's shield cannot block it. Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with shock and helplessness, and he let out a furious shout. Relying on his own strength and secret techniques, he could not deal with the mysterious Yin Ghost Gu. Helplessly, he could only summon the soul-reaping bell, activating the mysterious and cold black light, bursting out in all directions. Boom! The bone-chilling black light of death exploded, enveloping the surrounding thousands of meters. At least hundreds of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu were blasted away, turning into a dark blue wave, sweeping across the sky. Ji Tianqing finally let out a sigh of relief, and quickly kept the soul-reaping bell, summoning the magic treasure mountain river seal, and entering the magic treasure space. 2 breaths later, a scene that made him dumbstruck appeared. Those hundreds of thousands of Yin Ghost Gu that were blasted away actually flew back unharmed, and charged towards him even more crazily. Damn it! Not only are these Yin Ghost Gu indestructible, even the soul-reaping bell is ineffective against them. Could it be that they cannot be killed? High up in the sky, the third prince who was standing at the top of the altar sneered in disdain. Ha 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 ha, fool, Yin Ghost Gu are mysterious and unfathomable Gu. They do not have souls, what is the use of your soul attack? In my myriad Gu domain, they are undying, there is no end to them. Ji Tianqing, give up resisting. My 8 million Yin Ghost Gu are enough to devour all of your magic treasures. Even your flesh and soul will become a midnight snack for the Yin Ghost Gu. In the blink of an eye, over 1 million Yin Ghost Gu surrounded the mountain river seal, completely covering the golden light of the seal. The dense and endless dark Ghost Gu wrapped the mountain river seal into a huge blue ball that was the size of a hill. Every Yin Ghost Gu released dark blue flames, burning the mountain river seal, and opened their mouths to bite the seal with all their might. Ji Tianqing was in the treasure space inside the mountain river seal, and could clearly hear creaking sounds coming from the surface of the mountain river seal. In a short while, the layer of golden light on the surface of the mountain river seal was devoured. Immediately after, the indestructible mountain river seal dimmed under the corrosion of the dark blue flames, and gradually turned black. In fact, the frenzied biting of over 1 million Yin Ghost Gu left densely packed dents on the surface of the mountain river seal. Looking at the current situation, in at most an hour, the mountain river seal would be turned into a pile of scrap metal by the Yin Ghost Gu. Ji Tianqing was immediately filled with anxiety, his heart burning with worry. Right at this moment, a series of muffled rumbling sounds came from nowhere and reverberated endlessly in the heavens and the earth. Ji Tianqing was stunned, and so was the third prince on the altar. The two looked at the edge of the myriad Gu domain, and immediately saw that the 5-colored light screen that covered the sky was shaking intensely. Chapter 836. The sudden change stunned Ji Tianqing and the third prince. The two stared at the edge of the myriad Gu domain, watching as the 5-colored light barrier crumbled bit by bit. Countless cracks appeared on it. A few moments later, along with a series of loud bangs, angry roars of beasts could be heard. They seemed to have guessed something, and their expressions changed. Oh no! Our fight caused too much of a commotion and attracted the ancient mutated beasts. Hiding in the seal of mountains and rivers, Ji Tianqing pondered with a grave expression. The ancient mutated beasts suddenly appeared and were about to break the 10,000 Gu domain, giving him a chance to escape. However, he knew that there was more than one ancient mutated beast outside the domain, and they were all at the soul-refining realm. Even if he escaped the 10,000 Gu domain and got rid of the Yin Ghost Gu, he would still be killed by a group of ancient mutated beasts. Damn it! I forgot that ancient mutated beasts are everywhere in the buried star sea. The third prince's expression was the worst. He clenched his fists, and his heart was filled with anger and indignation. He had finally caught the opportunity to trap Ji Tianqing in the 10,000 Gu domain, and was about to torture him to death. However, just as he was about to succeed, a few ancient mutated beasts suddenly appeared and interfered. How could he not be angry? Bang! 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 The loud noises continued to sound, and became more and more rapid. The five-colored light screen shook more and more violently, and the cracks became bigger and bigger. Finally, with an earth-shattering boom, the five-colored sky in the southeast was instantly smashed into pieces, and a huge hole appeared in the sky. The huge hole was dozens of meters wide, and countless cracks appeared around it, and light shards flew everywhere. Immediately after, a black beast that was as large as a mountain and looked like a giant ape passed through the hole and entered the 10,000 gu domain. This was an ancient mutated beast that was 100 meters tall and as large as a mountain. It had a rough and violent appearance. It had 4 extremely thick limbs and a pair of dark red wings on its back, surrounded by dark red heavenly fire. A pair of dark red eyes that were as large as water tanks, like fiery red gems, contained a domineering majesty that looked down upon all living beings. Its entire body was covered in firm and bulging muscles that were as tough as magic treasures, and it was filled with a violent force that could destroy the world. The most terrifying thing was that Ji Tianxing and the third prince could clearly sense that the strength of this sky tyrant ape was 10 times greater than theirs. It was at least at the 6th level of the soul refinement stage. It was this terrifyingly powerful tyrant sky ape that had blasted open the myriad gu domain. One of them had just reached the soul refinement realm, while the other had not. In front of the sky tyrant ape, they were as weak as chickens, unable to withstand a single blow. Moreover, the sky tyrant ape wasn't moving alone. It was leading 6 ancient mutant beasts at the soul refinement realm. The 6 ancient mutant beasts had different appearances. Some looked like walking beasts, some looked like flying birds, and one of them was actually a 1,000-meter-long giant snake. They attacked the myriad gu domain crazily, tearing open that huge hole and shattering the entire 5-colored canopy. Along with a series of cracking sounds, the 5-colored sky barrier that enveloped an area of 50 kilometers in radius was shattered in an instant and gradually collapsed. The third prince's expression was as cold as ice, and his eyes were filled with anger. Fortunately, he had used the power of the myriad gu origin to unleash the myriad gu domain. Thus, after the domain was shattered, he did not suffer a backlash. At this moment, the sky tyrant ape's figure flashed and flew into the sky, arriving at the center of the domain. Roar! Its eyes were fixed on the huge blue ball floating in the sky. When it saw the millions of ghost goo, it immediately let out a furious roar. It actually opened its bloody mouth and spat out dark red heavenly flames, which covered the entire blue ball. Boom! The extremely powerful heavenly fire sent the blue ball flying, crashing into the ruins tens of miles away. More than half of the million ghost goo surrounding the mountain river seal were burned to death by the dark red heavenly fire, turning into wisps of blue light and dissipating. The ghost goo that were lucky enough to survive all fled in panic, flying towards the 5-colored altar in the sky like a swarm of bees returning to their nest. When the myriad gu domain was around, they were naturally indestructible and almost undying. But after the domain was shattered, they lost the support of the domain's power and became much weaker. The heavenly fire with terrifying might engulfed the entire sky, burning those ghost goo that were fleeing in panic into pieces. Next, the sky tyrant ape looked in the direction of the ghost goo that were fleeing in the sky, looking at the 5-colored altar in the sky and the third prince who was at the top of the altar. Roar! It let out another roar and charged into the sky, waving its huge fists and smashing them towards the 5-colored altar. Its fists were as big as houses, wrapped in a layer of dark red heavenly fire, containing the power to destroy heaven and earth. Moreover, its speed was extremely fast, the third prince had no time to resist or counterattack. Seeing the sky tyrant ape charging towards him, his expression changed and he wanted to escape on the 5-colored altar. Unfortunately, he was too slow. Bam bam! With an earth-shattering sound, the sky tyrant ape's fists landed on the 5-colored altar, sending the altar and the third prince flying. Whoosh! The 100-meter-tall five-colored altar was sent flying over 30 miles, shining with five-colored light, and its aura was chaotic. Fortunately, the five-colored altar was a Gu Path divine artifact after all. It was undamaged after receiving the Sky Tyrant Ape's direct attack. Although the third prince was not hit by the Sky Tyrant Ape, he was still injured, his face was pale and he vomited blood. This Sky Tyrant Ape's strength is definitely at the 6th level of the spirit refinement realm. It must be the leader of the nearby ancient mutated beasts. As soon as this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately entered the five-colored altar and drove it away without looking back. At this moment it was more important to stay alive. He did not have time to deal with Ji Tianqing. Under his control, the five-colored altar quickly shrunk to a size of 10 meters, spewing out five-colored flames and bursting out with unparalleled speed, like a meteor streaking across the horizon. Roar, roar! The Sky Tyrant Ape did not want to let him go so easily. After roaring into the sky, it immediately turned into a stream of flame and started to chase after him. At the same time, in the ruins dozens of miles away, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Ji Tianqing. The power of the seal of mountains and rivers was completely depleted. Its surface was filled with dents and was slightly damaged. Ji Tianqing kept the seal of mountains and rivers and was about to fly into the sky to search for the Sky Tyrant Ape and the third prince. At this moment, 6 ancient mutated beasts of the spirit refinement realm discovered him. They roared and pounced, wanting to kill him. Chapter 837. Ji Tianqing had already witnessed the prowess of the ancient beasts. The wind patrol beasts from before had put him in a difficult position, and he had almost died at the hands of the third prince. Now, the 6 ancient beasts following the domineering Sky Ape not only outnumbered them, but they were also more powerful than the wind patrol beasts. Therefore, he had no intention of fighting them. He turned around and fled without hesitation. He fled with all his might, and the further the better. He had almost exhausted all his energy, and his Dharma treasures were damaged to varying degrees. He was truly at the end of his rope. Once he was caught by the 6 ancient beasts, death was the only outcome. There was no chance of survival. Moreover, in order to avoid the domineering Sky Ape and the third prince, he chose another direction and fled with all his might. Swoosh! He rode on his golden sword and streaked across the sky like a golden shooting star. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 6 ferocious ancient beasts chased after him with all their might. They also burst forth with their fastest speed and followed closely behind him. Ji Tianqing only had about 30% of his true core left. He was truly exhausted. However, he did not dare to relax. His nerves were taut as he flew without regard for anything else. As time passed, his true core was quickly depleted. His body was extremely tired, and his mind was in a trance. His vision was also becoming blurry. However, the 6 ancient beasts did not give up on the chase. They looked like they would not stop until they killed him. Damned beasts! We have no enmity between us. Why do you have to chase me so relentlessly and kill me? Ji Tianqing was filled with grief, anger, and helplessness. He could not help but curse. Fortunately, his desire to live had allowed him to explode with energy, and his sword kinesis flight was faster than usual. An hour later, he had shaken off 3 of the 6 ancient beasts. 2 hours later, he had shaken off all 5 ancient beasts. They were completely out of sight. There was only one giant golden bird left. It was still in hot pursuit, and the distance between them was constantly closing. After all, Ji Tianqing's energy was extremely weak, and his sword kinesis flight was getting slower and slower. He hesitated for a moment before taking out a light red elixir from his interspatial ring. This elixir was called the explosive blood elixir. Yun Zhongqi had prepared it for him, and it was meant to be used in moments of life and death. After consuming this explosive blood elixir, it could burn the essence of one's flesh for 15 minutes, stimulating the deepest potential of one's body and increasing his strength. Of course, the explosive blood elixir was forbidden. It should not be used casually. Once the user's body's blood elixir was used, and his body would fall into an extremely weak state. He would need a long time to recover. Seriously, he could be unconscious for 10 days to half a month. When Yun Zhongqi had given the blood burst pill to Ji Tianqing, he had solemnly warned him not to use it unless it was absolutely necessary, and the his s's blood s. Suddenly, the explosive blood pill turned into a dark red stream of energy that spread through his body and quickly spread to his limbs and bones. The violent and powerful medicinal effect immediately filled his flesh and blood and started to burn his refined flesh and blood energy. His body turned red and hot. He was sweating profusely, but his sweat was evaporated into mist. The burning of his flesh and blood made him suffer a heart-wrenching pain. But he gritted his teeth and did not make a sound. Soon, the burning of his flesh and blood turned into a violent and vigorous true essence, surging wildly in his body. His aura suddenly became violent, and his strength doubled. Swoosh! The golden sword under his feet shone with a blinding golden light, and his speed doubled. In the blink of an eye, Ji Tianqing had pulled away from the flying beast. Moreover, as time passed, the distance between them kept widening. No matter how hard the flying beast chased, it could not catch up to him. Finally, a quarter of an hour had passed, and the strange flying bird was finally shaken off without a trace. Ji Tianqing finally let out a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Great, I finally got rid of them. As he thought of this, he felt a tingling sensation all over his body. Every muscle and every nerve in his body became stiff and uncontrollable. Incomparable exhaustion hit him. His body withered, his qi and blood withered, and his eyes darkened. Without a doubt, the explosive blood pill was about to wear off, and the side effects were about to erupt. No. I can't faint yet. I have to find a safe place to stop. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth and forced himself not to faint with his strong willpower. He hurriedly looked around, looking for a suitable place to hide. However, when he looked around, he found that he had chosen the direction of escape in his panic. Although the ground was still covered in dense forests, and there were many undulating mountain ranges around him, he did not know how far he had escaped, nor where he was. What was more terrifying was that he had lost his sense of direction. His mind was in a daze, and he could not even tell north from south. He fixed his gaze in front of him and saw a hazy and dazzling multicolored light. It was early in the morning. Dawn was about to arrive, and the world was dark. However, 5 kilometers in front of him, the dense forest had disappeared, and it was replaced by a dark, gray wasteland. The night sky was dark, but in the depths of the vast, boundless wasteland, there was a majestic ancient city, which was emitting a dazzling light. The Dead Star Sea was full of forests. How could there be a wasteland? And it was a gray, colorless wasteland. In the wasteland, there was a majestic, ancient city. The ancient city was emitting a hazy light, which could illuminate half the sky. This scene was simply too bizarre. Damn it, I must be seeing things. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. His consciousness immediately became blurry, and his eyes slowly closed. He had completely overdrawn his strength. As the side effects of the explosive blood pill broke out, he fainted on the spot. Then, the golden sword became dim, shrank to the size of a thumb, and went back into his body. He fell from the sky, drawing a sorry arc in the air, and fell straight into the dark and gloomy wasteland. Bam! Ji Tianqing fell hard on the barren wasteland, creating a deep pit in the ground. Dust flew up, and a dull, loud sound was heard. Fortunately, although he had fainted, his body was the ultimate sword body, which had been tempered thousands of times. Even if he fell from the sky, he was not injured. Unfortunately, he was lying unconscious in the deep pit, not moving at all. He had completely lost consciousness. In this mysterious, dangerous, and deadly dead star sea, he, who was unconscious, was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Chapter 838. 2 hours passed quickly. A new day had arrived. The sky was getting brighter, but it was still gloomy. At the edge of the gray wilderness, Ji Tianqing was still lying in the deep pit, motionless and unconscious. Half of his body was covered in mud. His clothes were ragged, and his body was covered in blood. He looked extremely miserable. At this moment, in the dense forest not far away, there was a rustling sound of branches and leaves. It seemed that there was a giant beast moving through the forest. Wherever it went, the towering trees would shake, and the leaves would part to the sides. There was no doubt that the smell of blood on Ji Tianqing's body had attracted some demonic beasts or beasts. After a short while, a 10-meter-long demonic beast with colorful patterns all over its body crawled out of the forest. It was a demonic beast with a mediocre bloodline. It looked like a tiger, but it also looked like a combination of a lion and a leopard. It didn't look alike at all. It probably had the bloodline of some ancient beasts, so its aura was very fierce. Its strength was also at Sky Origin Stage Level 3. If it was outside the buried star sea, this demonic beast would be a demonic king, which could dominate a region. If Ji Tianqing encountered this demonic king, he would be able to kill this demonic king with one strike. However, it was different now. Ji Tianqing was lying in the deep pit, motionless and unconscious. The demonic beast stopped at the edge of the forest. It stared at Ji Tianqing from dozens of meters away, saliva dripping from its bloody mouth. Obviously, it thought Ji Tianqing was its delicious breakfast. Its scarlet eyes were filled with a strong desire. It really wanted to rush into the gloomy wasteland, grab Ji Tianqing, and eat to its heart's content. However, it stopped at the edge of the forest, staring at the gray wilderness. It seemed to be hesitant and afraid. No one knew what it was hesitating about. 15 minutes passed. The demonic beast was attracted by the smell of blood on Ji Tianqing's body. It didn't want to leave. Not only that, it also had a strong thirst for blood. It only wanted to swallow Ji Tianqing into its stomach to replenish its vitality and strength. Perhaps it was because the wilderness was too peaceful and deathly still that there were no abnormal sounds. The desire to devour food gradually overcame the fear in its heart. It finally extended its claws and stepped on the gray wasteland tentatively. It's fine. Nothing happened. As a result, the multicolored demonic beast became bolder, and its other claws also stepped onto the wasteland. It was still safe and sound. The wilderness was still dark and deathly silent. The fear in the multicolored demonic beast's heart gradually dissipated. It began to walk toward the deep pit, and its speed became faster and faster. Obviously, it had made up its mind to capture Ji Tianqing in the deep pit and return to its nest to have a good meal. Ji Tianqing was still lying motionless in the pit, unable to feel the approach of death. The multicolored demonic beast was getting closer and closer to the deep pit. Finally, the 100 treasures brocade pouch on Ji Tianqing's waist opened with a swish. An ice-blue furry ice fox crawled out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch. It was Qian Yu. Old Ji. Wake up, old Ji. When it saw Ji Tianqing lying unconscious in the pit and the multicolored demonic beast rushing toward it, it immediately called out anxiously. However, Ji Tianqing did not respond. Qian Yu hesitated for a moment before it made up its mind. Its body expanded to more than 5 meters long. It's too late. I can't care so much. Saving my life is more important. It muttered to itself and quickly reached out its claws to grab Ji Tianqing. It jumped out of the deep pit with him and ran toward the depths of the wilderness at an extremely fast speed. Roar! The multicolored demonic beast had just reached the edge of the deep pit and was about to catch its prey when the cooked duck flew away. It immediately roared angrily and stared at Qian Yu with its scarlet eyes. Without hesitation, it jumped across the deep pit and chased after Qian Yu. Qian Yu was anxious. It quickly flapped its wings and ran with all its might to avoid the multicolored demonic beast's attack. However, its strength was only at the primordial core stage after all. It was much weaker than the multicolored demonic beast. In a short while, the multicolored demonic beast caught up with it. When the two were only 20 meters apart, the multicolored demonic beast jumped into the sky with all its might and pounced on Qian Yu with a roar. Roar! Qian Yu desperately used all its strength and its speed suddenly doubled. It narrowly avoided the multicolored demonic beast's attack. The sharp claws of the multicolored demonic beast almost brushed past its furry tail and tore off a handful of its ice blue fur. Ah! You damned ugly freak, you will be struck by lightning. Qian Yu cursed angrily as a tuft of her beloved tail was scratched off. It seemed that its curse had taken effect or that some mysterious force had suddenly appeared. Swoosh! When the multicolored demonic beast pounced on it again, a ray of white light appeared out of thin air in the dark sky. That ray of white light was like a thunderclap on a summer night. It was also like a long and narrow sword. It instantly tore through the dark sky and slashed across the multicolored demonic beast's body. The multicolored demonic beast's huge body was instantly cut in half. It fell straight from the sky and blood splattered all over the sky. Plop! With a muffled sound, the two halves of the multicolored demonic beast's corpse fell on the wasteland with a muffled sound. Although its corpse was still twitching and its limbs were still trembling, it was already dead. Seeing this scene, Qian Yu was instantly stunned and forgot to fly away. Ah! Oh my God! Is my curse really that effective? Qian Yu was a little dumbfounded. It stared blankly at the multicolored demonic beast's corpse and a strong sense of fear rose in its heart. This was because it understood that the mysterious white light must be some mysterious force and was definitely not its curse. If that mysterious force could kill the multicolored demonic beast, of course, it could also kill it. At this moment, the two halves of the demonic beast's corpse on the ground were enveloped by the mysterious white light and quickly dissolved into gray powder. Qian Yu saw the multicolored demonic beast's corpse turn into powder with its own eyes and immediately screamed in fright. It fled back into the 100 treasures brocade pouch in a panic. Oh my God, what the hell is this place? It's too creepy, too scary. Qian Yu hid in the 100 treasures brocade pouch and muttered with fear. It only felt that the dark wasteland was very eerie. Oh right, old Ji. Only then did it come to its senses and remember Ji Tianqing. The pitiful Ji Tianqing once again fell from the sky and landed solidly on the wasteland. He lay motionless on the ground. His body was covered in dust and he was still unconscious. Although Qian Yu was worried about his safety, it was afraid of the mysterious white light and did not dare to come out of the 100 treasures brocade pouch again. Fortunately, the wasteland was quiet and there were no more white lights or strange situations. Ji Tianqing was also safe and sound. Time passed silently. Unknowingly, 8 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing, who was in a coma, finally woke up and slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 839. When Ji Tianqing woke up, the sky was already bright. He frowned at the soreness and numbness all over his body. He was extremely weak. He struggled a few times before he got up from the ground. He did not even have the energy to care about the dust on his body. He checked his body and found that there was not a single drop of true essence left in his body. He was like an ordinary person who had never cultivated before. He had no skills, and his body was extremely weak. In this mysterious, dangerous, and strange wasteland, this was extremely dangerous. I didn't expect the side effects of the blood-burst pill to be so strong. Luckily, I escaped and did not die here. As long as he was still alive, there was still hope. He rubbed his somewhat blurry eyes and looked around to size up his surroundings. Beneath his feet was a gray and colorless wasteland. There was not a single blade of grass, and it was covered with gray soil and gravel. 10 miles behind him was a dense and deep forest. The wasteland was silent. There were no living creatures, and there was no spirit chi of heaven and earth. This wasteland was like a forbidden zone for life. It also seemed to have been sealed by some mysterious power. All spirit chi of heaven and earth was isolated. Ji Tianqing's ultimate sword body would naturally absorb spirit chi of heaven and earth to replenish his strength. His greenwood spiritual body would also automatically absorb the greenwood spiritual chi to heal his injuries. However, this was useless. There was no spirit chi of heaven and earth in the wasteland. If he wanted to recover his true essence and heal his injuries, he could only leave the wasteland and return to the dense forest. However, he was extremely weak now. He staggered as he walked. If he wanted to leave the wasteland, he would have to walk 10 miles. It was too difficult. Thus, Ji Tianqing sat cross-legged on the ground. He took out a few pills from his spatial ring and consumed them. He circulated his energy to refine the pills and recover his true essence and heal his injuries. The pills that Yun Zhongqi had prepared for him were the best pills in Cloud Spirit Palace. They were extremely effective. As the pills' effects exploded, his injuries began to heal quickly. His true essence was also recovering quickly. However, 6 hours had passed. The pills' effects had been completely used up. His injuries and true essence had only recovered by 20%. His injuries were too severe. His true essence had been completely used up. Counting on a few spirit pills to restore his injuries and true essence was simply a drop in the bucket. If it were any other time, Ji Tianqing would not be in a hurry. He would just sit there and meditate for 3 to 5 days, and his Jin Yuan and injuries would slowly recover. However, his father only had 3 days left to live. Time was of the essence. He was a little anxious. He frowned and thought about what he could do to help him recover his strength quickly. Relying on elixirs wouldn't work. No matter how many elixirs he took, he would still have to meditate for a day or two before he could completely digest the medicinal power. Thus, he rummaged through his spatial ring to see if he could find another way. Suddenly, his gaze landed on a dark green ball of light in the depths of the spatial ring. Within the ball of dark green light was a small green tree that was over a foot tall. It looked like a sapling, but it was actually lush with branches and leaves. Its trunk was thick and strong, and it contained an ancient aura. Without a doubt, this small tree was Duanmu Huang's treasure, the famous green light treasure tree. On the night that Ji Tianqing killed his way into Duanmu Huang's residence, he had fought fiercely with Duanmu Huang for over 100 moves. In the end, he had completely killed Duanmu Huang. After Duanmu Huang's death, the green light treasure tree became an ownerless object and fell into the ruins. Ji Tianqing had already seen the power of the green light treasure tree. He also knew that this treasure could gather greenwood spirit chi and grow all flowers and trees. It was also a peerless treasure for healing and saving people. Of course, he would not let go of this top-notch treasure. Before leaving the battlefield, he had secretly taken the green light treasure tree away. At that time, the green light treasure tree's power was almost exhausted and could no longer be used. Thus, he threw the green light treasure tree into his spatial ring and let it slowly recover its strength. More than a month had passed, and he had almost forgotten about the existence of this treasure. Now, when he saw the green light treasure tree again, he found that it had already recovered 80 to 90% of its power. This is great. I can borrow the power of the green light treasure tree to heal my injuries and recover my primordial chi. His heart was filled with joy as he quickly took out the green light treasure tree. Swoosh! The green light treasure tree was held in the palm of his hand, releasing a rich dark green light and emitting an incomparably rich green with spirit chi and vitality. He began to cultivate and absorb the power of the green light treasure tree to heal his injuries and replenish his depleted primordial chi. The green light treasure tree slowly rotated and released dozens of dark green streams of air into his body, enveloping him in a green light. As time passed, his primordial chi quickly recovered, and the injuries all over his body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Such a fast recovery speed was several times faster than when he used elixirs and miraculous medicines. After all, the green light treasure tree was very effective. He also had the green wood spirit body, so he could absorb the power of the green light treasure tree very quickly. In just a short 8 hours, his injuries were more than half healed, and he was basically fine. His true essence had also been completely restored, and his entire person had become full of vigor and vigor. What a miraculous treasure tree! It can catalyze the growth of trees and grass, and it is also a treasure for healing injuries and recovering primordial chi. Ji Tianqing was full of joy as he praised and quickly put away the green light treasure tree. He finished cultivating and stood up to look around, thinking about his next plan. I remember that before I fainted, I seemed to see a sky full of light in the depths of the wilderness, and there seemed to be a majestic ancient city. He thought about the scene he saw before he fainted, and his heart was full of doubts. He raised his eyes to look at the scene in the depths of the wilderness. However, the wilderness was vast and boundless, and there seemed to be no end to it. The depths of the wilderness were also flat, showing a gray scene. There was no light at all, and there was no ancient city. In the sea of trees, other than the endless demonic beasts and ancient beasts, there seems to be no clues related to the heaven-mending pearl. However, this wilderness is very strange, and it seems to contain some secrets. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought. After a moment of consideration, he decided to explore the depths of the wilderness. He flapped his wings and flew into the sky, advancing towards the depths of the wilderness as fast as lightning. At this time, Qian Yu saw that he had recovered his strength, and communicated with him through spiritual sense. "Old Ji, you're finally okay. You scared me to death before." Ji Tianqing chatted with it as he flew. "What's wrong? What happened before?" Qian Yu said with lingering fear, "Old Ji, that incident was too scary. This wasteland was very strange. At that time, you were lying unconscious on the ground, and there was a demonic beast at the demonic king level that wanted to eat you." Qian Yu then recounted the events that had transpired before. After Ji Tianqing heard it, he was also full of shock and confusion, and became more and more curious about this mysterious and strange wilderness. He had a vague premonition that there must be some secret hidden in this desolate wasteland. It was very likely that it was related to the ancient legend. Chapter 840. Things were just as Ji Tianqing thought. The wasteland was vast and boundless, as if it would never end. He flew continuously for 6 hours, but the wasteland under his feet was still flat, gray and colorless, with not even a blade of grass growing. As far as the eye could see, the heavens and earth were boundless, and there was nothing that could attract his attention. He looked down at the wasteland, his eyes unfocused, unable to find any clues. If he had not seen the sky full of light and ancient majestic city before he fainted, and if Qian Yu had not told him about the mysterious white light, he would not have found a reason to continue exploring the wasteland. Until 8 hours later, when he entered the deepest part of the wasteland, he suddenly made a discovery. 100 miles in front of him, a huge black shadow appeared vaguely, standing on the ground, motionless, exuding a majestic and vigorous aura. Finally, something has appeared. Even if it's an ancient beast, it's still better than nothing. In these 8 hours, he had not seen a single strand of hair, a single demonic beast, or a single tree. Now that he finally saw a black shadow, his spirits were immediately lifted, and he hurriedly flew over. Only when he got closer did he discover that this 100-meter-tall black shadow was an ancient dark brown statue. The statue depicted an ancient beast with a strange appearance. Half of its body was buried in the ground of the wasteland, and only the upper half of its body was exposed. The dark brown stone statue seemed to have experienced thousands of years, and had long been eroded by the passage of time. The rocks had been weathered into fine powder, falling down with a single touch. The huge beast's head was like a dragon's head, with a wide open mouth, a few long whiskers growing from the sides of the mouth, and a horn on its forehead. Ji Tianqing flew around the 100-meter-tall statue a few times, but still could not find any clues. It was just an ancient stone sculpture. There was no formation or hidden mechanism, and it was not a treasure. Ji Tianqing was a little disappointed, and could only bitterly leave, continuing to fly forward. However, he had only flown a few dozen miles when he saw another huge black shadow appear on the ground in front of him. It was also a dilapidated dark brown stone sculpture. It had collapsed on the desolate wasteland and was more than half buried. The surface of the stone sculpture had been weathered, and its shape was blurred. One could vaguely see that it was some kind of giant beast. Other than that, Ji Tianqing circled the stone sculpture a few times, but he didn't find any clues. Next, he continued to fly in the wasteland and found several more stone sculptures one after another. Almost all of the stone sculptures were old and broken, like dark brown hills. Some of them stood upright on the wasteland, some fell crookedly on the ground, their original appearances buried by the dust. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was amiss and stopped. He circled the area and observed the stone sculptures. This area was about 1,000 miles in radius. Several stone statues were scattered around this area, seemingly containing a faintly discernible mysterious aura. In the barren wasteland, there was nothing but these few statues. Such a strange and mysterious scene made Ji Tianqing fall into deep thought. There are a total of 9 ancient stone sculptures. They all seem to have experienced tens of thousands of years. They seem to be scattered randomly in the wasteland. I carefully examined each stone sculpture, but I didn't find any formations or mechanisms. These stone sculptures, just what secrets do they contain? He stood high in the sky, looking down at the wasteland below. He silently pondered, but he didn't have the slightest clue. Time quietly passed by. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours had passed. When night fell once more, everything in the world was swallowed up by darkness. Ji Tianqing was still standing in the sky, looking down at the wasteland and observing the 9 ancient stone sculptures, trying to find some clues from them. At this moment, the old and vigorous voice of Burial of Heaven suddenly rang out in his mind. Tianqing, I remember now. Ji Tianqing was immediately awakened, a hint of pleasant surprise and expectation flashing in his eyes. He hurriedly asked, Burial of Heaven, what did you remember? Burial of Heaven said in a hazy voice, back then, Kenshin and I really did come here. However, as for why or what happened in between, I can't remember. My memories are fragmented, and I only have a few bits and pieces of information. In this area of 1,000 miles, those 9 ancient stone sculptures are a gate. A gate? A formation gate? Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and looked around in confusion. No, it's not an ordinary formation, Burial of Heaven said in a solemn voice. It's the Open Heaven Gate. Open Heaven Gate. Ji Tianqing's body shook, and his pupils shrank slightly. Although, he didn't understand the true meaning of these 4 words. But from the literal meaning, this name was definitely extraordinary. Ji Tianqing was somewhat excited and expectant. He hurriedly asked, Burial of Heaven, what does the Open Heaven Gate mean? Could it be related to that ancient legend? Burial of Heaven was silent for a moment, then said in a solemn voice, I don't know, but if you want to explore the true secrets of the buried star sea, you need to open the Open Heaven Gate. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, how do I open it? You can't open it, only I can help you. Burial of Heaven's tone became heavier and heavier, and there was a faint sense of desolation. In my current state, I might be able to help you open it, but my strength will be exhausted again, and I will need to sleep for at least half a year. After saying this, Burial of Heaven was silent, waiting for Ji Tianqing to make a decision. Ji Tianqing frowned, and his expression was solemn as he considered and weighed the pros and cons. He had spent so much effort, experienced so many twists and turns, and finally helped Burial of Heaven recover 30% of his strength. But now, Burial of Heaven wanted to help him open the open heaven gate, but he would have to pay a heavy price. Was it worth it? After a moment, he had an answer in his heart. He no longer hesitated and his eyes became resolute. He said to Burial of Heaven in a solemn voice, "Burial of Heaven, I need your help. In order to save my father, I can't give up any hope. Don't worry, after this, I will do everything I can to help you recover your strength." Burial of Heaven didn't say much, and only said one word calmly. "Okay." As soon as he finished speaking, he revealed his divine soul avatar. Swoosh! A blurry shadow in a black robe appeared out of nowhere in the sky. It stood in the air, and its aura was sacred and majestic, looking down on the world. Without the slightest hesitation, it immediately waved its wide sleeves and made a profound hand gesture, forming a mysterious and extraordinary seal. The world was dark, and there was no light, but there was an invisible mysterious force flowing, like thousands of rivers flowing, and then intertwining. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky with a solemn expression, silently watching Burial of Heaven's every move. Although he didn't know how Burial of Heaven was going to open the open heaven gate, he could feel the invisible subtle changes in the world within 1,000 miles. Chapter 841. Time passed silently. The figure of the Burial of Heaven was still standing in the night sky like a towering mountain. Its arms were constantly waving, and its gestures were unpredictable. Ji Tianqing was dazzled by its movements, and his mind was filled with fascination. He could roughly guess that the technique that the Burial of Heaven was using was definitely not something that a mortal could use. Even a transcendent expert in the soul refinement realm would not be able to comprehend and grasp it. Perhaps, only primordial soul supremes would be able to understand a little bit of it. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The wasteland within a radius of 1,000 miles was actually covered by an invisible force. The 9 ancient stone statues scattered on the wasteland also strangely lit up with multicolored light, illuminating the world. The multicolored light became brighter and brighter, and finally covered a radius of 1,000 miles, making this area seem like a dream. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's heartbeat quickened. He muttered to himself, "It's this kind of multicolored light. It's finally appeared again." Immediately after, an ancient and majestic black city appeared in the hazy multicolored light that covered the sky. The city occupied a radius of a few hundred miles. It was larger and more majestic than any city that Ji Tianqing had ever seen. Even the continent's holy land of the Martial Way, Middle State City, could not be compared to this ancient city. This ancient black city that seemed to have experienced tens of thousands of years was situated on the wasteland with a few majestic mountain ranges as its walls. Within the ancient city, the streets were wide, and there were rows upon rows of buildings. There were also countless majestic palaces with simple and unadorned designs. The style of these buildings and palaces were all things that Ji Tianqing had never seen before. It was as if they did not belong to this world. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky above the ancient city. It was as if he could touch those majestic and sacred palaces with a stretch of his hand. However, all of this was illusory. It only existed in the multicolored light that filled the sky. The multicolored light and ancient city that he saw before he fainted appeared before his eyes again. It was so clear and lifelike. His heart was filled with excitement and anticipation. Finally, another hour passed. The Burial of Heaven finally stopped casting the technique and slowly retracted its arms. The majestic and ancient city slowly disappeared. The hazy multicolored light that filled the heavens and the earth also gradually converged and sank to the ground. In the end, the boundless multicolored light spread across the land, causing the desolate wasteland within a radius of 1,000 miles to become a dazzling land of 5 colors, like an incomparably huge mirror. Seeing this incredible and magical scene, Ji Tianqing's heartbeat quickened, and he was filled with amazement and excitement. He was incomparably curious and expectant. Just what kind of place was this, and what was the open heaven gate? At this moment, Burial of Heaven crossed his arms in front of him, his black robes fluttering in the wind. It was accumulating power. The shadow of its black robe became more and more blurry and transparent, as if it was gradually melting. Finally, when it had accumulated its strength to its limit, it opened its mouth and let out an ancient and vigorous roar. Split open the heavens. Following its roar, a gigantic black cloud vortex appeared in the dark sky. Within the vortex, a black shadow that was thousands of feet long suddenly appeared, carrying with it an incomparably terrifying power as it came crashing down from the sky. It was a black shadow that looked like a giant sword. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to it, and he instantly recognized it. It was the heaven-piercing sword steel. The dark brown heaven-piercing sword steel fell from the sky like a meteor, carrying with it an all-destroying power as it ruthlessly smashed down, striking the mirror-like multicolored land. Boom! Crack! An earth-shaking explosion erupted, reverberating through a radius of 1,000 miles. In that instant, Ji Tianqing saw with his own eyes that the multicolored land within a radius of 1,000 miles crumbled and shattered, turning into millions of multicolored fragments that dissipated with a bang. A destructive shockwave spread out in all directions, covering a radius of several thousand miles in the wasteland. In just a few breaths of time, the multicolored fragments that blotted out the sky had completely disappeared. The world returned to calm, and the loud explosion also gradually stopped. The heaven-piercing sword steel's power had been exhausted, and the lingering spiritual qi had all disappeared. It became dim, cold, and deathly still. Whoosh! The black-robed figure of the Burial of Heaven had long since dissipated, and the heaven-piercing sword steel had also vanished into thin air, returning to the Kenshin's tomb. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky, looking down at the scene below, a look of shock on his face. He saw that the land within a radius of 1,000 miles had been transformed into a vast lake. This vast lake was as clear as the sea, and its surface was as calm as a mirror. It could even clearly reflect the scene in the sky and his figure. The lake was as deep and serene as the deep blue sea, its bottom impossible to see. As Ji Tianqing was observing the lake, the voice of the Burial of Heaven resounded in his mind. Tianqing, the gate of heaven awakening has been opened. Hurry and go. The voice of the Burial of Heaven was somewhat weak. It was clear that it had exhausted all its strength in order to open the gate of heaven awakening. Ji Tianqing looked at the vast blue lake and asked in confusion, Burial of Heaven, this is the gate of heaven awakening? It's clearly a lake. Could it be that the gate of heaven awakening is hidden at the bottom of the lake? The voice of the Burial of Heaven was ancient and distant as it said, the ground beneath your feet is the sky of others. As it spoke, its voice grew weaker and weaker. By the time it reached the last word, it was almost inaudible. The Burial of Heaven only left behind this sentence before falling into a deep slumber. The ground beneath my feet is the sky of others. Ji Tianqing frowned, mulling over this sentence. He vaguely understood something, and a kind of enlightenment appeared in his heart. It's like a palace. I'm standing on the second floor, and the ground beneath my feet is the floor. But to the people on the first floor, it's the ceiling. Could it be that there's a secret realm hidden at the bottom of this lake? Or is it connected to another world? The sky of others. Who is the sky of others? Although he understood some things, he fell into even more confusion. Filled with anticipation and doubt, he descended from the sky and landed in the lake. Whoosh! He dived into the lake and swam to the bottom of the lake like a fish. The clear lake water was cool and did not have any temperature. It wrapped around his body, calming his mind and soul, allowing him to enter an ethereal state. If he cultivated in this lake, he could enter a miraculous state where he would forget about everything around him. Cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort, and it was very suitable for comprehending some profound secret techniques. But unfortunately, he was in a hurry and could not stay in the lake to cultivate in seclusion. He dived to the bottom of the lake at an extremely fast speed, and released his spiritual sense to explore the situation around him. However, there was nothing in the clear and cold lake water. There was nothing except for him. He dived to the bottom of the lake for a quarter of an hour, but he still could not see the bottom of the lake. He could only estimate that he had dived to a depth of over 100 miles. However, he believed in the words of the burial of heaven and dived to the bottom of the lake without hesitation. 2 hours passed. He dived to a depth of nearly 1,000 miles, but he still could not see the bottom of the lake. It was as if this lake had no bottom at all. However, at this time, he saw that there was a huge whirlpool in the dark lake below. Chapter 842. He was surrounded by lake water in all directions, and there was nothing in sight. Not far from his feet, there was a giant whirlpool that seemed to never stop swallowing the water. Ji Tianqing stopped and stood at the edge of the whirlpool. He frowned and thought for a while. Could that giant whirlpool be the open heaven door that the burial of heaven mentioned? This thought flashed through his mind. He hesitated for a while and then swam into the whirlpool. After all, he had no choice. Since he had decided to enter the lake, he had to keep going down. There was nothing in the lake except for the whirlpool. No matter where the whirlpool led to, no matter whether it was life-threatening or not, he had to go in. Swoosh! When he swam into the whirlpool, he was immediately engulfed by the terrifying devouring power and was pulled into the center of the whirlpool. Even though he was at Sky Origin Stage Level 7 and could unleash the power of a half-step soul tempering stage cultivator, it was useless. He could not resist the devouring power of the mysterious whirlpool and was pulled into the whirlpool uncontrollably. Then, he was pulled into the center of the whirlpool and fell into the whirlpool along with the endless lake water. An incomparably powerful force fiercely suppressed his body and soul, causing his consciousness to become blurry. Gradually, he was about to fall unconscious. He wanted to get into the seal of mountains and rivers and protect himself with his magical treasure to avoid being killed by the whirlpool. However, he could not activate his magical treasure and fainted immediately. His consciousness fell into the endless darkness. In his unconscious state, he drifted along in the whirlpool and entered a passageway formed by the endless lake water. The tunnel was actually a giant water column that was about 10 miles wide. He did not know how long it was or where it led to. After a long time, Ji Tianqing slowly woke up. He gradually regained his sight and hearing. He heard the sound of splashing water coming from afar. It was getting closer and clearer. He slowly opened his eyes and saw the scenery around him. There was endless water around him. It was like a blue sea with waves that kept washing over him. He was like a piece of driftwood, floating on the surface of the sea and being washed by the waves. Fortunately, there were 2 huge black reefs beside him. He was stuck between 2 huge reefs, so he was not washed away by the waves. Where is this? His heart was filled with doubt as he muttered to himself, raising his head to look around. With one look, he was instantly stunned. 1,000 meters behind him, there was actually an incomparably huge dark brown city. This city was grand and ancient. It was constructed from dark brown rocks, and it seemed to be modeled with the passage of time as if it had experienced the passage of 10,000 years. Even though this ancient and majestic city was extremely dilapidated and seemed to have been broken down from the middle, only half of it was left. However, this dilapidated and ancient half-city still had a radius of over 200 miles. Moreover, the collapsed and damaged buildings and palaces in the city were of a style that he had never seen before. They were ancient and solemn. No. He had seen those houses and palaces. Not long ago, when the burial of heaven opened the heaven-opening door, an ancient and majestic city appeared in the sky full of multicolored light. However, the illusory image that appeared in the light was a complete ancient and majestic city. As for the ancient city behind Tianqing, it was as if it had experienced a massive earthquake, or as if it was a city of ruins that had been destroyed by a war between gods. This majestic ancient city stood on the boundless sea, silently enduring the erosion of time and the erosion of the sea, and still standing tall. Tianqing stared at the mysterious ancient city, and his heart was filled with shock. So, the multicolored light that I saw in the wilderness was this ancient city. I actually came here after I entered the vortex. After a long time, he calmed down and looked up at the sky again. When he saw the scene in the sky clearly, his body suddenly shook, and his face was full of shock. He saw that in the infinitely high blue sky, there was a dim yellow sun. The dim sunlight was shining on the boundless sea. And that blue sky was actually the boundless blue sea. The boundless blue sea seemed to be blocked by a layer of transparent and invisible mirror, separating it from this world. Seeing this scene, he recalled the words of the burial of heaven. The ground under your feet is the sky for others. Now, Tianqing saw this magical scene with his own eyes and finally understood. At the same time, he also understood one thing. He was no longer in the buried star sea, and he was no longer in the grey wasteland. In fact, he was no longer in the original world, and he had come to another strange world. Open the gate of heaven. Open the gate of heaven and enter another world. I see. He understood everything, and his heart was filled with shock and excitement. At this time, he saw that there was a huge hole in the blue sky hundreds of miles to the east. Endless blue sea water leaked out from the hole, forming a huge water column that was thousands of miles high, pouring into the sea. The sea of the world above is the sky of this world. There is a hole in the sky, and endless sea water leaks out, turning this place into a vast sea. I understand now. That hole is the vortex at the bottom of the lake, and I came to this world by following that water column. Tianqing stared at the water column that connected the sky to the sea, and murmured with a complicated expression. It was the first time in his life that he had seen such a magical scene, and the shock in his heart could be imagined. The experience and knowledge of these few hours had completely overturned his understanding of the world, as if a door had been opened for him, allowing him to see a whole new world. He looked up at the blue sky, and after observing for a while, he quickly saw several more holes in the sky. Endless sea water poured out from each hole, forming an indomitable blue water column that connected the sky and the sea. He counted a total of 4 holes in the sky, and they were located in 4 different directions of the ancient city. Each hole had a radius of more than 10 miles, and endless sea water was pouring out at every moment. Tianqing gradually calmed down, and he flew out of the blue sea toward the ancient city. He had a premonition that the mysterious ancient city must be hiding a huge secret. A moment later, he entered the dilapidated ancient city and flew 100 meters above the ground. He slowed down and observed the city at a close distance, using his spiritual sense to explore everything in the city. The ancient city was desolate and silent, and there was no sound. The cracked and twisted stone streets, the collapsed and broken houses, and the dilapidated walls and fences that had been weathered by the wind seemed to be silently telling a story of the ancient past. There was not a single blade of grass in the city, and there was not a trace of green, and there was no breath of life. Tianqing looked around, and in the ancient city that was 200 miles in radius, there were only endless dark brown ruins. However, the ruins of the buildings could show that the creatures that once lived here must have been an extremely powerful race. Chapter 843. Tianqing flew around the desolate ancient city for 4 hours, circling the ancient city a few times to investigate. However, he did not find any valuable clues. During this period, he discovered many ancient words and patterns on many of the broken walls, stone tablets, and statues in the city. Those strange words, ancient patterns, and symbols clearly represented a special meaning and contained some secret. However, he did not recognize any of them. Because this was not the Tian Xian continent, it was not the world he knew. This was a strange world. The civilization, architectural style, and everything here were all foreign to him. Other than the various words, patterns, and symbols, he also found some miscellaneous things in the ruins. There were a few broken pieces of jade that were only the size of a thumb. There were also some tattered pieces of cloth that were almost decayed into ashes. These broken things seemed worthless, but they contained the vicissitudes and ancient aura of tens of thousands of years of accumulation. Ji Tianqing vaguely felt that these things should have some value, and perhaps involve some secret. Therefore, he put these things in a treasure box and solemnly put it into his spatial ring. When the burial of heaven woke up in the future, he would ask the burial of heaven for advice. After 4 hours, he temporarily stopped flying and searching. He stood in the sky above the ancient city and frowned in contemplation. Previously, when I was in the wasteland, I saw a sky full of multicolored light and the illusion of the ancient city. The burial of heaven exhausted all of its power to open the open heaven door, and I came here after many twists and turns. This ancient city, the mysterious sea in the sky, and the 4 holes in the sky are all related to the ancient legend of heaven mending. There should be a huge secret hidden here. It's impossible that there are no clues at all. Ji Tianqing silently analyzed, trying to find information and clues related to the heaven mending bead. I must have missed something, so I couldn't find the real clue. Time was running out. There were less than 2 days left before the 5-day deadline. However, he tried his best to remain calm and collected, thinking and analyzing repeatedly. Very quickly, another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing flew around the sea around the ancient city and made a new discovery. Beneath the azure sea, there were actually mountains of varying heights. Even this ancient and dilapidated city had an incomparably huge mountain below it. However, the boundless sea drowned everything and covered the mountain range. Ji Tianqing summarized the many clues, and a mature conjecture gradually emerged in his mind. Perhaps this place was originally a majestic mountain range, and an ancient city sat on the tallest mountain peak. However, a heaven-shaking battle destroyed this majestic city and broke the sea in the sky, causing a hole to appear in the sky. Endless seawater poured down, submerging countless mountains and lands, forming a vast ocean. Only this dilapidated ancient city, located on the highest mountain peak, was able to survive for tens of thousands of years without being submerged by the sea. Ji Tianqing's mind constantly flashed with images, and he vaguely guessed the truth behind the great changes in the world. However, when he thought of this, he suddenly stopped. His body trembled, and his expression changed. No. From the 4 holes in the sky, endless seawater poured down. After tens of thousands of years of continuous pouring, this world has long been submerged. Even if this majestic city was located on the highest mountain peak, it would definitely be submerged by the sea. Unless, this world also has a hole that drains out endless seawater, allowing the ancient city to survive until now. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing had a certain understanding in his heart, and suddenly realized something. He vaguely felt that he was getting closer and closer to the truth, and was about to solve the mystery. Therefore, he flew to the sky above the ancient city and carefully observed the sea below. He quickly discovered that the holes in the sky in the east, south, west, and north were pouring down torrential seawater, stirring up layers of waves. Endless waves surged from all directions, constantly washing the dilapidated ancient city for tens of thousands of years. However, when those waves approached the ancient city, they calmed down and disappeared. He used the black water rope of Tianqing's 5 extreme secret techniques, and shot out a jet of black water into the sea near the ancient city. The black water rope did not disperse. It floated along the waves to the edge of the ancient city, and quickly sank into the sea. As the black water rope continued to sink, its speed became faster and faster. Soon, it had drilled into the depths of the sea. From the majestic mountain peak below the ancient city, there seemed to be an invisible force that was pulling and devouring it. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately smiled, and a glint of light flashed across his eyes. He, as expected, it seems like I guessed right. There is also a hole in this world, and it is in the mountain peak below the ancient city. Therefore, he landed in the dilapidated ancient city, and used the secret technique Earth Emperor's Shield to dive deep into the ground. This ancient city used to have many powerful magic arrays, but with the passage of tens of thousands of years, all the magic arrays had disappeared. Ji Tianqing dived into the ground without any hindrance. He did not encounter any obstruction. After 15 minutes, he had dived tens of thousands of feet into the ground, and entered the interior of the majestic mountain peak. Swoosh! He penetrated through a layer of hard rock that was hundreds of meters thick, and entered a spacious and huge cave. This circular cave had a radius of 5 kilometers. The surrounding rock walls were flat, and there were traces of man-made carvings. On the rock walls, there were more than 90,000 holes that were as thick as water buckets. Each hole spewed out a column of seawater that was as thick as a water bucket, and poured into the cave. The 90,000 water columns formed a curtain of water that covered the sky and covered half of the cave, turning it into a vast ocean. Without a doubt, all the seawater in this world had leaked into this cave and was discharged from here. And on the surface of the water in the middle of the cave stood an ancient black altar. The altar was in the shape of a pyramid, and it was unknown what material was used to build it. It looked very ancient and mysterious. At the top of the ancient altar, there was a 3-meter square pool that was formed from a piece of pure white jade. The pool was filled with azure seawater, and it seemed to have a mysterious force that swallowed the endless seawater in the cave, and it was unknown where it was discharged. It was because of this altar and the existence of this white jade pool that this world was not completely submerged by the sea, and that the ancient city could be preserved until today. Ji Tianqing flew to the top of the altar, and looked at the white jade pool at a close distance. He could clearly feel that this white jade contained a mysterious and powerful force, as if it could encompass heaven and earth, and swallow the 4 seas. Regardless of whether it was the azure-like treasure tree, the seal of mountains and rivers, or the soul-reaping bell, none of them could be compared to this white jade. These 3 treasures were all high-grade soul-level magic treasures, and this mysterious white jade was definitely an existence that surpassed soul-level magic treasures. This was definitely a divine jade that was comparable to a divine artifact. Chapter 844. The pool formed by this mysterious white jade had a huge suction force for Ji Tianqing. Ever since he entered this world, he had searched the entire ancient city and even explored the sea within a few hundred miles, but he did not find any valuable treasures. The thing that moved his heart the most was this mysterious jade stone at the top of the altar. The more he looked at it, the more he was moved. He could not help but have an idea in his mind. He wanted to move this mysterious jade stone and take it for himself. He still had not found the heaven-mending pearl, nor did he find any clues related to it. With this jade stone that was comparable to a divine object in front of him, how could he let it go? He had to get some benefits first. He could not come here for nothing, right? As for what would happen if he moved the mysterious jade stone, he did not care. Even if the seawater could not be discharged, causing the cave to be filled and the ancient city to be submerged by the boundless sea, it had nothing to do with him. Anyway, this world had nothing to do with him, and there were no living creatures. Even if he moved the mysterious jade stone, he would not feel guilty. Therefore, he quickly used his spiritual sense to investigate the power of the mysterious jade stone. He quickly found that this altar had been abandoned for thousands of years. There was a powerful array set up on the altar, and it had powerful magic power and power. Now, it was gone. The power of the altar had long been exhausted. The reason why it could stand until now without collapsing was because the material was tough enough. Only that mysterious piece of jade was still extremely powerful and was still supporting the entire altar. Originally, the mysterious jade stone was protected by the array of the altar. However, the array had long disappeared, and the mysterious jade stone had lost its protection. It could only rely on its own power and effect to continuously discharge seawater. Ji Tianqing spent a little effort to dig out the mysterious jade stone from the altar. The square white jade stone was wrapped in the golden light of his true essence. It slowly left the altar and flew in front of him. When the mysterious jade stone completely left the altar, the entire altar shook violently, and a rumbling sound echoed in the cave. Soon, dense cracks appeared on the tall and ancient altar, and it began to collapse and shatter. In just a few breaths, the entire altar completely collapsed, turning into countless brick ruins that fell into the water. More than 90,000 water pillars on the surrounding rock walls were still pouring seawater into the cave. However, once the mysterious jade fell into Ji Tianqing's hands, it could no longer expel the seawater. As a result, the water level in the cave continued to rise, and soon, the ruins of the altar were submerged. Ji Tianqing had already expected this result. He turned around and flew away without hesitation. He hugged the mysterious jade stone and wanted to escape from the cave. If the seawater can't be drained out, this cave will soon be filled. Next, the dilapidated ancient city will also be submerged. I have to leave this place as soon as possible. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He immediately flew to the top of the cave and used the earth escape technique to leave. At this moment, he suddenly realized that the mysterious jade stone in the shape of a pool was shining with a dazzling white light. Soon, the mysterious jade began to emit dazzling white light and began to flip and change. In just a few breaths of time, the mysterious jade stone with a radius of 3 meters had shrunk by dozens of times, turning into a fist-sized white jade ball. Rather than saying that it had become a fist-sized jade ball, it was more appropriate to say that it was a white jade bead. This white jade bead was sparkling and translucent. Its surface was covered with a layer of mysterious patterns, like mountain ranges and rivers. It contained a mysterious and powerful force, causing people to feel fear in their hearts. They could not help but feel reverence. That kind of power did not seem to belong to a mortal martial artist, but to the power of a god. Ji Tianqing held the white jade bead with both hands. He felt as if he was holding a star. He completely did not expect that the mysterious jade stone in the shape of a pool would turn into a jade bead. His expression changed. His eyes were filled with shock and surprise. He blurted out 3 words. Heaven-mending bead. I understand now. So it is the heaven-mending bead. Previously, when he saw the ancient altar and the mysterious jade stone in the shape of a pool, he only thought that it was a peerless divine jade. He did not associate this jade stone with the heaven-mending bead at all, but the surprise came so suddenly. This is great. I finally found the legendary heaven-mending bead. Father can finally be saved. At this moment, his heart was filled with excitement and excitement. He could not help but roar in a low voice. However, the seawater rose very quickly. In just 10 breaths of time, more than half of the cave was submerged. The water level kept approaching. He did not dare to stay any longer. He suppressed his excitement and put the heaven-mending bead into his spatial ring. Then, he quickly drilled into the rock wall and used the earth escape technique to escape. After 15 minutes, he quickly escaped from the cave and returned to the dilapidated ancient city. The ancient city was still quiet and did not look out of place. However, the sea around the ancient city became more and more turbulent, with huge waves rolling. The seawater that poured down from the 4 holes in the sky could not be discharged, causing the water level to rise continuously. Although the sea level was not rising quickly, Ji Tianqing estimated that the entire ancient city would be submerged in at most 10 to 12 hours. I have the heaven-mending bead. This world has no value to me. I have to leave this place as soon as possible and return to Cloud Spirit Palace to save Father within 2 days. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself. He frowned and looked around, thinking about how to leave this world. The ancient city was surrounded by the sea. Other than the 4 water pillars and the 4 holes in the sky, there was nothing else. After thinking about it, he could not think of a way to leave. He could only fly toward the hole in the sky to the east of the ancient city. I passed through the hole in the sky and came to this world. I don't know if I can return to the buried star sea by following the water pillar. Although he was worried and uncertain, this was the only path he could take. He could only give it a try. An hour later, he flew to the vicinity of the towering water pillar and temporarily stopped in the sky. As he got closer, he could feel the majesty of the water pillar. The worry in his heart grew. Torrential seawater poured down and smashed into the sea below, creating earth-shattering rumbles and splashing huge waves. The water pillar that was 5 kilometers thick contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. He wanted to go against the flow of the water pillar and return to the buried star sea through the hole in the sky. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Of course, this itself was ascending to the heavens. Ji Tianqing hesitated for a moment. Then, he flapped his wings and flew high into the sky. He flew for 2 hours before reaching the highest point in the sky. Above his head was an invisible mirror-like barrier that separated the 2 worlds. Above the mirror was the endless seawater. 1,000 meters in front of him was the sky-blue water pillar. Chapter 845. Bang! With a muffled sound, Ji Tianqing dashed into the water pillar like a flash of light. He was already prepared. He condensed a shield of true origin to protect himself, and unleashed his strongest power to rush towards the hole in the sky above. However, the moment he rushed into the water pillar, he was hit by an incomparably powerful force. His true origin shield instantly collapsed as if it had been hit by an all-out attack from a soul-tempering stage powerhouse. He was paralyzed on the spot and could not use any strength. Not only could he not rush up, but he was also suppressed by the water pillar and fell down. Endless seawater wrapped around him as he fell from the sky and smashed into the sea below. There was no doubt that his first attempt had failed. However, after falling for dozens of miles, his body gradually regained consciousness, and he struggled to rush out of the water pillar. He returned to the sky with a pale face and panted heavily. He quickly adjusted his breathing to relieve the pain in his body. Fortunately, he had cultivated the ultimate sword body, and his physical defense was extremely strong. Otherwise, the terrifying impact of the water pillar would have crushed him into a meat patty on the spot. While he was silently adjusting his breathing, the sea level below continued to rise, swallowing the ancient city bit by bit. After half an hour, Ji Tianqing finished adjusting his breathing and returned to his peak state. He began his second attempt, rushing towards the water pillar with all his strength. In order to increase his chances of success, he even used the seal of mountains and rivers to protect himself. Bang! He dashed into the water pillar like a flash of light, and a loud muffled sound was heard. An unparalleled power fiercely hit the seal of mountains and rivers. Unfortunately, the seal of mountains and rivers had used up all its power and had only recovered 10%. Ji Tianqing only lasted for 2 breaths in the water pillar before he was suppressed and fell down. He had no choice but to rush out of the water pillar and return to the sky again. His second attempt also ended in failure. However, this time, he had the protection of the seal of mountains and rivers, so his body was not injured. The seal of mountains and rivers had used up all its power and became dim. He kept it in his interspatial ring. He frowned and thought for a moment, then took out the heaven-mending pearl from his interspatial ring. He held the resplendent heaven-mending orb in his hands and stared at it with a burning gaze. He could feel the mysterious power it contained, and his heart was filled with anticipation. Heaven-mending bead, O heaven-mending bead! You are a divine item left behind by an ancient god, a supreme treasure that can mend the heavens. I hope you won't disappoint me and bring me out of this world." He muttered in a low voice, and then channeled his true essence into the heaven-mending pearl. Suddenly, the heaven-mending orb lit up with a dazzling white light, forming a circular light barrier. It was like a huge ball of light, enveloping him. Being in the white ball of light, he felt a lot more at ease. Once again, he rushed towards the water pillar. This was his third attempt. Boom! With a muffled sound, the white ball of light fiercely rushed into the towering water pillar. The water column contained an incomparably powerful suppressive force, and it immediately struck the white ball of light. However, the white ball of light only trembled a little before it dissolved the powerful impact. Then, Ji Tianqing burst out with all his strength and rushed up with all his might. The white ball of light continued to dissolve the water column's impact, and began to climb up, approaching the huge hole in the sky. Although the white ball of light was climbing at a slower speed, Ji Tianqing had undoubtedly succeeded. With the help of the heaven-mending orb, he was able to resist the terrifying suppressive force, and went against the flow of the towering water column. After 100 breaths of time, the white ball of light finally passed through the hole in the sky, and left the mysterious world. Whoosh! With a flash of white light, the ball of light crossed the invisible barrier between the two worlds, and returned to the profound sky world. Ji Tianqing was instantly overjoyed, and his heart was filled with excitement and joy. However, he did not dare to relax, and continued to burst out with power, rushing upwards. This was because the white ball of light was still in the huge whirlpool. The whirlpool exploded with a powerful suction force, and wanted to pull him down. He held the heaven-mending orb with both hands, and desperately poured in true essence to activate the power of the heaven-mending orb. The white light emitted by the heaven-mending orb became more and more dazzling, causing the white ball of light to become brighter and brighter, and its power to become more and more powerful. Finally, the white ball of light rushed out of the incomparably huge whirlpool, and returned to the azure sea. Only then did the terrifying pressure and suction force disappear, and Ji Tianqing finally heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly put the heaven-mending orb back into his spatial ring, and swam upwards like a fish. As if he did not know fatigue, he swam continuously for 2 hours, and then floated to the surface of the water. Splash! When he rushed out of the water, he brought with him a large splash of sparkling water. He finally returned to the sky, and felt a familiar aura, and saw a familiar scene. The water below him was the huge lake with a radius of 1,000 miles. Beside the lake was the grey wasteland, and there were 9 ancient stone statues. Without a doubt, he had successfully returned to the wasteland in the depths of the buried star sea. I'm finally back. Fortunately, I obtained the heaven-mending orb. All the life and death crises I experienced before were worth it. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky above the lake, and revealed a gratified smile as he muttered in a low voice. He looked at the sky, and estimated the time. Damn it, it's already the afternoon of the 4th day. I still have 1.5 days, and I have to rush back to Cloud Soul Palace immediately. His expression changed, and he hurriedly turned to leave, flying in the direction he came from. In order to rush back to Cloud Soul Palace as soon as possible, he did not hesitate to take out his sword embryo, and flew on his sword in the sky. Swish! He stepped on the golden sword, and like a golden stream of light, he streaked across the sky, and quickly left the lake. 6 hours later, he flew out of the mysterious wasteland, entered the vast forest, and flew toward the exit of the buried star sea. What he did not know was that after he left the mysterious wasteland, the 1,000-mile lake gradually disappeared. The area returned to its original state, and it became a grey wasteland. The 9 ancient stone statues that were scattered in the wasteland immediately disintegrated, and became dust that covered the ground. Night fell. Ji Tianqing sped across the forest like a golden meteor streaking across the night sky. It was extremely dazzling. Wherever he passed, countless demonic beasts and ancient mutated beasts were alarmed. those ferocious demonic beasts and ancient mutated beasts all began to pursue him. However, ordinary demonic beasts could not catch up to him at all. Even those ancient mutated beasts in the soul-tempering realm were left far behind after chasing him for a few hundred miles. They had no choice but to give up the chase. The long night was over. When a new day arrived, and the sun rose, Ji Tianqing finally arrived at the exit of the buried star sea. Without hesitation, he passed through the clouds and left the forbidden land of death, and rushed back to Cloud's Soul Palace with all his might. A few hours later, it was evening. Chapter 846. This tall and sturdy figure was the third prince, Long Zitian. Ji Tianqing was like a meteor streaking across the sky, leaving in a carefree manner. He was covered in blood and his hair was disheveled as he fled the buried star sea in a sorry state. When he passed through the clouds and escaped the buried star sea, he immediately fell from the sky and smashed into a mountain peak. Plop! With a muffled sound, the third prince fiercely fell on the mountain peak, creating a deep hole in the grass and splashing mud everywhere. However, he had already exhausted all of his true origin energy and strength. He did not care about his image and dignity as he lay in the deep hole, gasping for breath. The golden robe he was wearing was a magic treasure, but it had already become a pile of rags. His entire body was covered in wounds, all kinds of bloody holes and scars. There were more than 100 of them. Blood kept gushing out from his wounds, dyeing him a bloody man. With a pile of mud covering his body, he looked even more ridiculous. He had no choice. He had been chased by the dominating sky ape for an entire night, running for thousands of miles in the buried star sea for his life. In the end, he used all of his trump cards and methods and finally got rid of the dominating sky ape. To be able to escape with his life and not become the dominating sky ape's supper was already very lucky for him. In addition, the third prince had done something very dangerous, something that could even be called a suicide mission. After he got rid of the dominating sky ape, he rested for a few hours and recovered 60 to 70% of his strength. Then, he went to find the heaven-swallowing beast that he had been dreaming of. He did not expect that his luck would be so good. After searching for a few hours in the buried star sea, he actually found a heaven-swallowing beast. However, he found 3 heaven-swallowing beasts. A male, a female, and a cub. It was obvious that they were a family of 3. The 2 adult heaven-swallowing beasts were at the 4th or 5th level of the soul-refining realm. They were very violent and overbearing. The half-grown heaven-swallowing beast was only at the 5th or 6th level of the sky origin stage. With the third prince's strength, it was almost impossible to capture an adult heaven-swallowing beast. His target was the cub of the heaven-swallowing beast. He patiently followed and observed for a few hours, but he still could not find a chance to make a move. The 2 heaven-swallowing beasts had finished hunting with their cub and were about to return to their nest to rest. He could no longer suppress the impatience in his heart and attacked with all his might. Although he had successfully snatched the heaven-devouring beast's infant, he had also paid a heavy price for it. The 2 heaven-devouring beasts went berserk and attacked him with all their might, beating him until he covered his head and ran away like a rat, battered and exhausted. He fought with the 2 heaven-devouring beasts for 6 hours and was beaten black and blue all over, almost losing his life on the spot. In the end, he did not hesitate to use a forbidden secret technique and borrowed the power of the myriad Gu origin to escape the encirclement of the 2 heaven-devouring beasts. After he escaped from the encirclement, he didn't dare to stay any longer and fled towards the exit of the buried star sea with all his might. The 2 heaven-devouring beasts fell into a berserk state, relentlessly pursuing him for an entire day. It was only when they were about to arrive at the exit of the buried star ocean that the 2 heaven-devouring beasts stopped their pursuit and were forced to retreat into the buried star ocean. After all, the buried star sea was enveloped by a mysterious power. Even the ancient mutated beasts in the soul refinement realm could not escape the burial star sea. Otherwise, they would die in the clouds and turn into dust. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed. Silence reigned on the mountain peak. The third prince lay in the deep pit, panting for breath for 2 hours before he finally recovered some strength. He slowly struggled to get up and shook off the soil covering his body. He lowered his head to look at his bloody body and saw that it was covered with crisscrossing wounds. He then took out the myriad gu origin. He held the 5-colored altar in his left hand and made hand seals with his right hand, using a secret technique to heal his injuries. The 5-colored altar released countless strands of 5-colored spirit light that enveloped his body. Soon, the 5-colored spirit light healed the wounds all over his body, removing the blood and dirt from his body. His physical injuries were temporarily suppressed. He took out 2 elixirs and swallowed them, circulating his energy to refine the medicinal effects. Unknowingly, another 2 hours passed. He refined the medicinal effects and finally recovered 20% of his quintessential essence. He stared coldly at the 5-colored altar and saw that a miniature heaven-devouring beast was suppressed in the Dharma treasure space of the altar. That heaven-devouring beast was in a coma. Its entire body was wrapped in 5-colored spirit light and surrounded by countless strands of blood-red light, looking very evil. Ha ha ha. I finally got the heaven-devouring beast. After I use the divine venomous goo to catalyze it to grow up, it will be a great killing weapon in my hands. At that time, I will be able to carry out my grand plan and get rid of that damned Long Yunxiao. I will use all my strength to deal with Cloud Spirit Palace. The corners of the third prince's mouth twitched, revealing a sinister sneer. And that damn Ji Tianqing, that despicable little bastard. I will remember this enmity and will never forget it for the rest of my life. After I return to middle ground to recuperate, I will tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes. Thinking of Ji Tianqing, he gnashed his teeth in hatred. His eyes were filled with a cold light, and his body emitted an extremely strong killing intent. A day passed, and it was late at night. Cloud Spirit Palace was brightly lit and as quiet as ever. In the depths of the palace, 2 people were talking in a luxurious secret room. These 2 people were Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey. Other than the 2 of them, there was another person in the secret room. It was Ji Changkong. Ji Changkong lay motionless on the ice jade bed like a corpse. His body was cold and stiff, and his vitality was extremely weak. At this moment, he had reached the end of his life. His soul energy was extremely weak, like a candle that was about to be extinguished. Yun Zhongqi looked at Ji Changkong with a grave expression. His heart was heavy, and he sighed bitterly. Sigh. The 5-day deadline is almost up. There are only 2 more hours before his soul dissipates. Miracle Dr. Bailey also looked at Ji Changkong. His expression was as heavy as his heart. It was filled with worry and reluctance. I have already done my best. For the past 5 days, I have continuously used a secret technique to maintain his physical body's vitality and soul energy. It's a pity that my abilities are limited and I can no longer extend his life. Sigh. Miracle Dr. Bailey also sighed heavily. Yun Zhongqi shook his head gently and said in a heavy tone, perhaps this is fate. If he dies just like this, I don't know how sad Tianqing will be when he hears the news. Miracle Dr. Bailey said with a heart full of worry, things are already set in stone. I'm afraid there's no turning back. Right now, I'm only worried about Tianqing. I hope that he can return safely and at least see his father one last time. As for the heaven-mending pearl, it's just an illusory legend. How can we take it seriously? Yun Zhongqi nodded and said in a serious tone, Father-in-law, don't worry. If Tianqing doesn't return by tomorrow, I will personally go to the buried star sea to find him. His father is about to pass away. I can't let anything happen to him. Miracle Dr. Bailey was about to reply. At this moment, the door of the secret room suddenly lit up and slowly opened. Chapter 847. Yun Zhongqi and Bailey Li turned their heads to look at the door of the secret chamber. When the two of them saw the figure clearly, they immediately revealed a look of surprise and disbelief. Tianqing. You're finally back. Tianqing. It's great that you're back safely. As they spoke, the two of them hurriedly went to welcome him. Without a doubt, this travel-worn and somewhat battered figure was Ji Tianqing. Ever since he left the buried Star Sea, he had been flying on his sword, rushing back to Cloud Soul Palace as fast as he could. He had flown for nearly 16 hours without stopping. He did not even have time to catch his breath. Fortunately, he had made it back to Cloud Soul Palace before midnight. However, he had used up almost all of his true origin and was about to collapse. At this moment, his white robe was a little dirty, his face was pale, and his hair was disheveled. He gasped for breath as he staggered into the secret chamber. His eyes were fixed on the ice jade bed in the corner. Uncle, Master. How is my father? He did not have time to bow to Yun Zhongqi and Bailey Li. He only greeted them and walked to the corner of the secret chamber to check on his father's condition. Yun Zhongqi saw that he was extremely weak and that he was staggering and trembling. He quickly reached out to support him. Tianqing, don't worry. Your father is fine for now. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing finally heaved a sigh of relief. He looked relieved. It's good that he's fine. At least I'm not late, Bailey Li nodded with a gratified expression. He stroked his beard and said, we're relieved that you're back safely. Yun Zhongqi also felt the same. He quickly said to Ji Tianqing, Tianqing, rest for a while. Uncle has something to say to you. His tone was heavy. It was obvious that what he wanted to say was related to Ji Changkong. There were only 2 hours left. Ji Tianqing was about to die. He wanted to advise Ji Tianqing to be mentally prepared. However, Ji Tianqing had no intention of resting. He said anxiously, Uncle, let's talk later. 5 days are almost up, and there are only 2 hours left. I have to save my father first. As he spoke, he took out the heaven-mending pearl from his spatial ring and held it in his palms. Yun Zhongqi and Divine Dr. Bailey were both stunned. They frowned and looked at him, sizing up the heaven-mending orb. Tianqing, what is this? Ji Tianqing quickly replied, this is the heaven-mending bead. What? How is this possible? Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey were stunned. Their eyes widened in shock as they stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. The two of them were stunned as they stared at the heaven-mending orb. For a moment, they didn't know what to say. This fist-sized white jade bead was sparkling and translucent. Its surface was covered with veined patterns that resembled mountains and rivers. It looked very ancient and mysterious. The white jade bead glowed with a dense white light and emanated a powerful mysterious power, as if it had the power to engulf the entire world. The two of them couldn't believe that this white jade bead was the legendary heaven-mending orb. From the beginning, the two of them treated the heaven-mending orb as an illusory ancient legend. They never thought that Ji Tianqing would be able to obtain it. Therefore, when they saw that Ji Tianqing had returned, the two of them didn't mention the heaven-mending orb, nor did they ask if he had found it. Because, in their eyes, the heaven-mending orb was a legendary divine object. Whether or not it really existed was unknown. How could it be easily found? But now, Ji Tianqing really took out a mysterious and powerful ancient jade bead and told them that this was the heaven-mending orb. How could they not be shocked? How could they not feel shocked? Tianqing, you actually found the heaven-mending orb? This is the legendary heaven-mending orb. Tianqing, how did you find it? And where did you find it? Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey were filled with excitement and curiosity as they looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and said in a serious tone, Uncle, Master, time is of the essence. Use the heaven-mending orb to heal my father first. I will explain this matter to you later. Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey immediately reacted. They revealed an awkward expression and smiled embarrassedly. Cough cough, we lost our composure. Tianqing, you are right. Saving people is more important. We can talk about other things later. Therefore, Miracle Dr. Bailey quickly calmed himself down and took the heaven-mending orb. He walked to the side of the ice jade bed and began to heal Ji Changkong. He held the heaven-mending orb in his left hand and formed a mysterious seal with his right hand. He used an ancient secret technique to activate the heaven-mending orb's power. Immediately, the heaven-mending orb released 9 finger-thick gentle white lights and entered Ji Changkong's body. Soon, Ji Changkong was enveloped by the gentle white light. He slowly floated up and hovered above the ice jade bed. The white light contained a mysterious and powerful energy. After entering his body, it gathered in his mind and wrapped around his 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. It began to slowly repair and heal him. This process was extremely slow and hidden. It could not be seen with the naked eye or spiritual sense. Only a spirit refinement realm expert could observe the changes in Ji Changkong's soul using the power of their soul. The secret room was silent. Miracle Dr. Bailey was focused on using the secret technique of the heaven-mending orb to repair Ji Changkong's soul and spiritual energy. Yun Zhongqi stood at the side and watched Ji Changkong's changes with concern. If Miracle Dr. Bailey could not hold on or needed any help, he would lend a hand. Ji Tianqing could only watch silently. He could not help at all. He could only pray for his father in his heart. Unknowingly, 8 hours had passed and the sky outside was already bright. Miracle Dr. Bailey had continuously used the technique for half the night and consumed a huge amount of spiritual energy. His soul was also very tired. At this time, he finally stopped and slowly withdrew his right hand. He smiled and stroked his beard. He turned to Ji Tianqing and said with a gratified tone, "Tianqing, your father's life is finally saved. You can rest assured. This heaven-mending orb is indeed a legendary divine item. It is more mysterious and powerful than any magic treasure I have seen." As he spoke, he returned the heaven-mending orb to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing took the heaven-mending orb and quickly looked at his father, Ji Changkong. He saw that Ji Changkong was still unconscious and lying motionlessly on the ice jade bed. His physical body had recovered its vitality and was wrapped in a dense white light. His skin was also faintly glowing. He was no different from a normal martial artist. His 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls had also gathered and his spiritual energy was gradually stabilizing. Although his aura was still very weak, at least his condition was stable. It was just like a normal martial artist who was seriously injured. Even with a divine item like the heaven-mending orb, it was impossible to cure him in a day. Next, Miracle Dr. Bailey still had to use the heaven-mending orb every day to treat his injuries. Chapter 848. With Ji Tianqing's injuries stabilized, Ji Tianqing felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Miracle Dr. Bailey had used up too much of his magic power and his soul was also a little tired. He needed to return to his residence to recuperate. After he left the secret chamber, Yun Zhongqi reminded Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, you must be exhausted these past few days. You must have experienced many dangers. You should also quickly go and rest. Your father's condition has stabilized and there won't be any more changes." Ji Tianqing nodded. "Uncle, I will meditate in this secret chamber. It will also be convenient for me to take care of my father. You still have a lot of things to take care of, so you should go do them first." The two of them chatted for a while before Yun Zhongqi left the secret chamber to take care of Cloud Soul Palace's affairs. Ji Tianqing walked to the spirit liquid pool in the corner of the secret chamber and sat in it. He began to meditate and recover his true essence. A day passed quickly. Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey only returned to the secret chamber in the middle of the night. Ji Tianqing had already finished his cultivation. His true essence had mostly recovered and his mental state was much better. He was no longer as tired as before. Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey had been holding back their doubts and curiosity for an entire day. After seeing Ji Tianqing, the two of them asked him what had happened in the past few days and how he had found the heaven-mending pearl. Thus, Ji Tianqing told the two of them everything he had seen and heard after entering the buried star sea. Of course, he did not mention the burial of heaven and the open heaven door. He vaguely glossed over it. Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey also understood that Ji Tianqing definitely had his secrets, so they did not probe further. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianqing finished talking about his experiences in the buried star sea. Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey were filled with excitement and shock. Their eyes were filled with yearning. I really did not expect that the legendary buried star sea not only had many powerful ancient beasts, but also a mysterious world passage. I thought I had traveled across the Tianxian land and had a good understanding of all the mysterious places in the world. I didn't expect such an incredible thing to happen. The ground under our feet is the sky for others. Tianqing, these words of yours are simply the truth of the great Tao. They contain boundless mysteries that are worthy of us cultivators to spend our entire lives exploring. Yun Zhongqi's heart surged and he couldn't help but exclaim. He had gained a new understanding of the profound sky world. Miracle Dr. Bailey was also shocked. He stroked his white beard and asked doubtfully, "This is unbelievable. What kind of place was that mysterious wasteland?" When I was looking through the information, I also saw someone mention that wasteland. However, according to the information recorded in the history books, only a very small number of people had seen the wasteland. No one knew the secret of that wasteland. Only you, Tianqing, were able to unravel the secret and make such an important discovery. If this matter were to be made public, the entire Tianxian land would be shaken. This was definitely a shocking secret that would shock the martial arts world. Furthermore, the heaven-mending pearl from the ancient legends actually existed. Doesn't this mean that those immortals from the ancient legends also once existed on the Tianxian land? Of course, Ji Tianqing also understood how shocking the open heaven door and the world passage were. However, he would keep this a secret and only let those closest to him and those he trusted know about it. After a long while, when Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey had calmed down, he said with a serious expression, "Uncle, Master, the secret in the depths of the buried star sea proves that the ancient legends are true. In the ancient Tianxian land, there were indeed many immortals. However, why did the immortals disappear after the end of the ancient era and disappear from this world? Where did those powerful immortals from the ancient legends go? Are they still alive?" In the past 1,000 years, only Kenshin had surpassed the primordial soul realm and passed the heavenly tribulation to become an immortal. Currently, in the Tianxian land, the primordial soul realm was the strongest, and there were only 2 or 3 of them. Why was no one able to pass the heavenly tribulation and touch the legendary immortal realm? There must be some earth-shattering secret hidden in this. If we can uncover it, perhaps we will have the opportunity to learn about the immortal realm of the martial way. After listening to Ji Tianqing's words, Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey nodded in agreement. That's right, Tianqing, you are absolutely right. Many strong people have thought about these questions and even investigated them, but no one knows the answer. If we can uncover the answer, we will definitely be able to change the martial way of the Tianxian land and even touch the immortal realm above the heavenly tribulation. Yun Zhongqi was one of the strongest people in the continent. He had a high status and great power. Therefore, his vision was no longer limited to the human race and the middle state, but the entire Tianxian land. If there was a chance to uncover the ancient secrets and understand the truth behind the disappearance of the immortals, he would do everything he could to find out the truth, even if it meant sacrificing his life. This was his goal as a strong person. Miracle Dr. Bailey frowned and thought for a while. Then, he said in a serious tone, "Tianqing, I have been troubled by these questions for a long time. Therefore, for the past 100 years, I have been traveling the world to find out the secrets of the Tian Xian land. I want to uncover the truth behind the disappearance of the immortals and the heavenly tribulation. Although we are only at the soul-tempering realm now and are far from the heavenly tribulation and the immortal realm, this secret seems to have nothing to do with us. However, every martial artist who is unwilling to be mediocre must have great ambitions and work hard to reach the peak of the martial way. Only then can they have a chance to touch the immortal realm. I am old and have traveled the continent for more than 100 years, but I have not found any useful clues. Perhaps, when you reach the soul-tempering realm and have the ability to travel the world and explore the ancient ruins, you will have a chance to uncover the truth. I have high hopes for you. I believe that you will be able to do what we can't. Yun Zhongqi nodded in agreement and looked at Ji Tianqing eagerly. Ji Tianqing looked at the two of them and said with a smile, "Uncle, Master, it is still too early for us to discuss these things. We can hide this secret in our hearts. In the future, we will have a chance to uncover it. As for now, let's take care of the matter at hand." Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey nodded with a smile and stopped discussing the ancient legends and secrets. Ji Tianqing remembered something and said with a serious expression, "This time, I almost had a life-and-death battle with the third prince in the buried Star Sea. This guy is sinister and despicable. He has the Gu Dao divine weapon, the origin of all Gu. He can release strange and powerful divine venomous worms. Duanmu Huang and the head of the Mu Rong family had their lives controlled by his divine venomous worms. That was why they were forced to listen to him. Now that he has reached the soul-tempering realm, he will definitely make a move to get rid of me in Cloud Soul Palace. All three of us are targets that he wants to eliminate. Next, we must make preparations and take precautions as soon as possible to deal with his schemes." Chapter 849. Ji Tianqing's solemn reminder made Yun Zhongqi and Miracle Dr. Bailey alert. Yun Zhongqi had already made preparations to prevent the Murong family and the third prince from taking revenge. However, Ji Tianqing mentioned the origin of all poisonous insects and the mysterious divine venomous insect, which made him even more cautious. He would not follow in the footsteps of the Duanmu Huang and the Murong family. He would not let the third prince have the chance to plant the divine venomous insect on him. Although the origin of all poisonous insects was very powerful and the divine venomous insect was strange and unpredictable. However, planting the divine venomous insect required meticulous planning and a lot of time and methods. As long as Yun Zhongqi was careful enough and did not give the third prince a chance, he would not fall for it. After an hour, the three of them finished discussing the third prince's matter and confirmed their next plan. Yun Zhongqi went to deal with the matters of Cloud Spirit Palace while Miracle Dr. Bailey was in charge of treating Ji Chankong's injuries. Ji Tianqing only needed to cultivate and recover his strength as soon as possible. Unknowingly, 5 days had passed. On the morning of the 6th day, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation. His strength had recovered to its peak, and he was once again in high spirits. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Miracle Dr. Bailey had just finished casting the divine venomous insect. He quickly walked to the side of the cold ice jade bed and asked Miracle Dr. Bailey, "Master, how is my father?" Miracle Dr. Bailey looked at him and smiled while stroking his beard. "Tianqing, you woke up at the right time. I have just finished treating your father. Your father's injuries have completely healed. His soul has been repaired and strengthened by the heaven-mending pearl and his strength has increased by several times. Moreover, I have given him many spirit pills and soul-level elixirs. With the help of the heaven-mending pearl, he has absorbed the power of the elixirs and his strength has increased by leaps and bounds. He has reached the origin core realm. His body and soul have been modified and strengthened. His innate talent has also increased greatly. From now on, not only will he be able to cultivate with twice the result with half the effort, he will also have a high chance of breaking through to the Heaven Origin Realm and becoming a Heaven Origin Realm expert." Hearing Miracle Dr. Bailey's words, Ji Tianqing's face was full of smiles. He was very gratified and excited. He was happy for his father. Master, you've worked hard during this period of time. Thank you for saving my father. This is great. Father has suffered for dozens of years. Now that the bitterness is finally over, this can be considered as a blessing in disguise. Divine Dr. Bailey nodded with a smile and said, "All right, Master has been casting spells every day for the past few days. My spiritual power and magic power have been greatly consumed. I will return to recuperate now. Your father's injuries have already healed, so I'll return this heaven-mending bead to you. Also, your father should be waking up soon. You should stay with him. You and your father must have a lot to talk about after going through this ordeal." Finished speaking, Divine Dr. Bailey returned the heaven-mending bead to Ji Tianqing and left the secret room with a smile. Only Ji Tianqing and his father were left in the secret chamber. Silence was restored immediately. Ji Tianqing held the heaven-mending orb in his hand as he stood beside the frigid ice jade bed, carefully sizing up his father. His father's complexion was rosy, and his life force was very stable. His skin was also glowing, and there was even a faint layer of white light. Moreover, he could also see that his father's white soul mist had become much more solid than before, and its volume had also increased by 2 times. This undoubtedly meant that his father's spiritual power had strengthened by several times. Seeing this, he was instantly stunned. He frowned and muttered to himself, "How can this be? I can actually see my father's spiritual power." He was filled with shock and thought that he was hallucinating. With his strength at the heaven origin realm, he had yet to cultivate his divine soul. It was simply impossible for him to see other people's souls. In his shock, he lowered his head and looked at the heaven-mending bead in his left hand. The heaven-mending bead was shining with a dense brilliance, emitting an invisible mysterious power. He raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, could it be that the heaven-mending bead's power helped me see these things? The effects of this divine bead are too miraculous. Just as he was filled with doubts and thoughts, Ji Chongkong slowly woke up and opened his eyes. He was lying on the frigid ice jade bed. His eyes were somewhat blurry as he looked around. He muttered softly, "Where is this? Father, you're finally awake. That's great." Ji Tianqing came back to his senses. With a face full of surprise, he reached out to support him and helped him sit up on the frigid ice jade bed. Ji Chongkong looked at him with a joyful expression. "Tianqing. Was it you who saved me? Where are we?" Ji Tianqing supported his father and hurriedly explained, "Father, we're in Cloud Soul Palace. You were captured by the demon experts earlier and were heavily injured. You were unconscious for more than 10 days. Demon race? I was unconscious for more than 10 days. Ji Chongkong frowned and asked with a face full of confusion, "Tianqing, what happened? Hurry up and tell me." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded, "Father, more than 10 days ago, I went to the gate of Zhongzhou City to welcome you. In the end, I waited until dusk and didn't see you. Instead, I saw Jiang Chen covered in blood." He recounted everything that had happened in detail. Of course, he skimmed over the matter of him going to the buried star sea and searching for the heaven-mending bead. After Ji Chongkong finished listening, he immediately revealed a guilty expression and said with a heavy tone, "Tianqing, it's really been hard on you. It's father's fault for being useless and not being strong enough. The first time I came to Zhongzhou City, I caused you to suffer such great danger and almost lose your life." Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianqing hurriedly shook his head and said, "Father, what are you saying? What trouble is there? You're my father. Even if I have to climb a mountain of blades or dive into a sea of fire, I definitely won't let you get hurt. I can only blame the demon race for being too despicable and vicious. I hate that I can't kill all the demon race in the world. That's right. The demon race is too savage, too despicable." Ji Chongkong was also full of hatred and said with a worried tone, "Tianqing, the demon race schemed to deal with you. You must be careful and protect yourself well. Father, don't worry. I'll be careful. Ji Tianqing nodded and comforted him with a few words. The father and son chatted for a long time before their moods calmed down. Ji Tianqing smiled and said, Father, Cloud Soul Palace is very safe. Your injuries have just healed, so you can temporarily stay in Cloud Soul Palace and recuperate and cultivate in peace. Ji Changkong nodded and said, That's good too. In a few days, I'll go and discuss with Asgard Master Yun and his wife to set the wedding date earlier. Tianqing, you don't have to worry about me. Concentrate on your matters. Thus, Ji Tianqing brought his father out of the secret room and arranged a place for his father to stay. After settling his father down, he returned to the secret room and prepared to cultivate in seclusion. The secret room was resplendent and filled with spirit energy. He sat in the secret room and took out the heaven-mending bead from his spatial ring. He held it in his palm and carefully observed it. Ever since he obtained the heaven-mending bead, he had never had the time to carefully study it. This was an item from ancient legends, a divine item that could mend the heavens. Whether it was the seal of mountains and rivers, the soul-reaping bell, or the green light treasure tree, none of them could be compared to it. Chapter 850. If he could comprehend how to control the heaven-mending orb, this divine item could become his greatest trump card and reliance. Pure Heart Dharma I. He shouted in a low voice and used his secret technique, causing his eyes to turn golden as he carefully observed the heaven-mending orb. However, his pure heart Dharma I could see through falsehoods and disguises, but it could not see through the heaven-mending orb's essence and secrets. Clearly, his secret technique was useless against the heaven-mending orb. Thus, he used his spiritual sense to invade the heaven-mending orb. In the end, it still did not work. His spiritual sense was not strong enough and was completely blocked by the heaven-mending orb. He was unwilling to give up, so he used his majestic true essence and poured it into the heaven-mending orb, wanting to nourish and refine it. In the end, the true essence he poured in was like a clay ox entering the sea, completely devoured by the heaven-mending orb. Ji Tianqing busied himself for an entire day, but he still could not do anything about the heaven-mending orb. This heaven-mending orb was truly too mysterious. He did not cultivate the corresponding technique, so he could not control it. Helpless, he could only ask his master, Divine Dr. Bailey, for help. Divine Dr. Bailey was also helpless and could not do anything about it. He could use the heaven-mending orb's power to heal Ji Changkong because he used an ancient and powerful secret medical technique. If Ji Tianqing wanted to refine the heaven-mending orb, even if he cultivated his secret medical technique, it would still be useless. After receiving this answer, Ji Tianqing could only return to the secret room. He decided to temporarily put the heaven-mending orb aside and prepared to cultivate and increase his strength. At this moment, Burial of Heaven's voice suddenly sounded in the depths of his mind. Perhaps, you can try the blood-refining technique. Suddenly hearing Burial of Heaven's voice, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, then asked with a heart full of surprise, Burial of Heaven, weren't you in a deep sleep? Could it be that you have recovered your vitality? Recovered my vitality? Easier said than done. Burial of Heaven replied with a serious tone. Ji Tianqing was a little confused and said in his mind, You said you would be in a deep sleep for more than half a year, but you woke up in just a few days. What's going on? My soul remnant is indeed in a deep sleep, but this is a wisp of my divine telekinesis. I can still communicate with you, but I can't help you with anything, Buried Heaven explained. Of course it did not recover its vitality, it was only a strand of its consciousness. Previously, it to the heavens to condense soul of heaven's soul to form a soul clone using a secret technique. Of Burial of Heaven's soul of heaven to heaven's soul clone to heaven to burn to the end of heavens of soul form. Ji Tianqing understood this and nodded, so that's how it is. To the point. Burial of Heaven replied, that's a commonly used sacrificial refining method in ancient times. Many deity realm experts would use their blood to refine divine artifacts. This method can allow people to refine divine artifacts faster and get twice the result with half the effort. They can reach a state where their blood is connected to the divine artifact and their souls are connected, making it easier to use. Furthermore, the heaven-mending pearl is a divine artifact, and your blood contains Kenshin blood. It's most suitable for you to use the blood refining technique to refine this divine artifact. Ji Tianqing immediately understood what it meant. He said expectantly, "All right, then hurry up and teach me the blood refining technique." Burial of Heaven did not waste any time and said directly, "Remember, the blood refining technique's incantation is, absolute void, absolute tranquility, all living things together, I will observe and repeat." Ji Tianqing did not dare to be negligent. He quickly held his breath and concentrated on memorizing the incantation. Fortunately, the incantation was not long, nor was it complicated. He quickly memorized it. After Burial of Heaven finished explaining the incantation, it gave him a few words of advice and then fell silent. Ji Tianqing silently comprehended the incantation of the blood refining technique. After meditating for 4 hours, he had basically comprehended the incantation. Thus, he began to try using the blood refining technique to refine the heaven-mending pearl. He took out the heaven-mending pearl and placed it in front of him. It floated quietly in the air and emitted a dense white light. Blood refining technique. He formed an incantation with both of his hands and quickly waved them around. He formed a mysterious seal and began to use the secret technique. As the brilliance on his fingertips flickered, streaks of flowing light arcs were drawn. They quickly condensed into a network of veins, like a net of interweaving light. This net, condensed from light, wrapped around the heaven-mending orb and circulated quickly. After finishing the incantation, he circulated his energy and forced out a drop of blood essence from his heart. He forced it out from the tip of his right index finger and dripped it on the net. Immediately, the faint golden blood essence spread out and flowed along the entire net. It flickered with a faint golden light and emitted a mysterious and powerful divine power. Blood refining. Condense. Ji Tianqing shouted in a low voice and pointed at the heaven-mending pearl with both of his hands. The faint golden net immediately contracted and tightly wrapped around the heaven-mending pearl. It began to refine and fuse with it. The heaven-mending pearl also slowly rotated. It lit up with an even more dazzling white light and absorbed the faint golden net. As time passed, the faint golden net gradually disappeared and completely fused with the heaven-mending pearl. After 6 hours, the blood refining technique was completed. Ji Tianqing's heart blood successfully fused with the heaven-mending pearl. The blood refining was a success. At that moment, he immediately felt a mysterious connection between him and the heaven-mending pearl, as if they were connected by blood. He used the invisible power of his spiritual sense. With a thought, he could control the heaven-mending pearl to fly and rotate in front of him. With another thought, the heaven-mending pearl quickly shrunk and became only the size of a walnut. Whoosh! A white light flashed. Before he could react, the heaven-mending pearl drilled into his forehead and entered his mind. How can this be? Ji Tianqing was startled and his expression changed. Immediately after, he clearly felt the heaven-mending pearl drilled into the depths of his mind and entrenched itself there, guarding his soul tightly. In his mind, there was originally a nirvana divine crystal wrapped around his soul. A miraculous scene appeared. The heaven-mending pearl emitted a gentle white light and wrapped around his soul and the nirvana divine crystal. Immediately after, the nirvana divine crystal was catalyzed and burned. It turned into wisps of soul power and fused with his soul. His soul power rapidly increased. He felt as if he was full. His soul began to expand rapidly and his consciousness became a little dizzy. However, this was not a bad thing and there was no danger. His soul power was rapidly increasing. His soul was strengthened and was continuously becoming stronger. After a short half an hour, the entire nirvana divine crystal was completely catalyzed. The Nirvana divine crystal had completely turned into soul power and strengthened his soul to the limit, reaching an incomparably powerful level. This caused his spiritual sense and mental reaction to increase by several times. Originally, his spiritual sense could only explore a radius of 700 meters. Now, it could explore a radius of 1,000 meters. This was the limit of a Sky Origin realm expert. Only a half-step soul refinement realm expert could do this. Chapter 851. It is indeed a divine item. It is so magical. This Nirvana crystal had been in my head for a year. I could only absorb its power subtly. I didn't expect that the heaven-mending orb would only take 1 hour to activate all the power of the Nirvana crystal. It has strengthened my soul to the limit of the Sky Origin stage. My body is the ultimate sword body. It has already reached the limit of the Sky Origin stage. Now my soul has also reached the limit of the Sky Origin stage. It is almost the same as a half-soul cultivation stage cultivator. Although my cultivation level didn't increase, my combat ability has been doubled. Ji Tianqing was excited as these thoughts flashed through his mind. He had just refined the heaven-mending orb with the blood-refining art. How could he not be excited when he received such great benefits? At the same time, he was even more curious and expectant. What other magical effects did the heaven-mending orb have? After he calmed down, he started to cultivate and refine his sword heart. He wanted to reach the 8th level of the Sky Origin stage. Soon, he realized that the heaven-mending orb could not only protect his soul, but also his heart. When he refined his heart with the sword energy, he had to endure unparalleled pain and torture. His heart was also scarred. The heaven-mending orb seemed to have intelligence. When it saw that his heart was injured, it released a gentle white light to heal his wounds. As a result, his pain was greatly reduced. His heart was recovering faster. The refining effect was more than doubled. Before this, he estimated that he would need at least 3 months to reach the 8th level of the Sky Origin stage. However, it was different now. With the help of the heaven-mending orb, he had a feeling that he could reach the next level in half a month. The heaven-mending orb's extraordinary effect made his cultivation much easier. His cultivation speed was unbelievably fast. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed. He had been cultivating in the secret room for 10 days without any rest. He actually broke through the next level and reached the 8th level of the Sky Origin stage. After 10 days of cultivation, Ji Tianqing reached the 8th level of the Sky Origin stage. With the help of the heaven-mending orb, his heart was refined to the extreme. It was extremely tough and strong. Next, he would proceed to the last step of the heart of the sword. He would merge the sword embryo with his heart to form the heart of the sword. Once the heart of the sword was formed, he would reach the 9th level of the Sky Origin stage. However, Ji Tianqing did not continue cultivating in seclusion. After meditating for a day and consolidating his martial arts foundation, he left the secret chamber. It was late at night, and there were 2 guards guarding the door of the secret room. Seeing him come out, the 2 guards hurriedly bowed and said, "Congratulations to young Master Ji for coming out of seclusion. Young Master Ji, the Palace Lord has ordered you to meet him after you come out of seclusion." Hearing the guard's report, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Did Uncle Yun explain the reason?" The guard bowed respectfully and answered truthfully, "Not yet. Young Master Ji, you'll know when you see the Palace Lord." Ji Tianqing nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He walked towards Yun Zhongqi's residence. He knew that since Yun Zhongqi had arranged for the guards to wait for him here, there must be something he wanted to discuss with him. However, Yun Zhongqi didn't knock on his door to summon him, which meant that the matter wasn't particularly urgent. Could it be that Yao Yao and I have already agreed on the wedding date? The thought flashed through his mind, and a smile appeared on his face. His heart was filled with anticipation. 15 minutes later, he arrived at Yun Zhongqi's residence and came to the door of the study. The guard guarding the door of the study immediately saluted and reported his arrival to the study when he saw him. "Master, young Master Ji is here." The light in the study was on, and Yun Zhongqi's voice sounded. "Let him in." The guard responded and hurriedly gestured for Ji Tianqing to come in. Ji Tianqing stepped into the study and saw Yun Zhongqi sitting in front of the desk. He seemed to be handling some business. There was a burning incense burner on the desk, and there were many piles of documents and memorials. More than half of them had yet to be read. It was obvious that Yun Zhongqi had been very busy recently, and he was very tired. Yun Zhongqi put down his writing brush and looked up at Ji Tianqing. He said in a gentle voice, "Tianqing, you've come out of seclusion. Ha! It's only been 10 days, and you've broken through again." He was a powerful cultivator in the soul refining stage, so he could tell that Ji Tianqing had reached the 8th level of the sky origin stage. He was surprised, and he couldn't believe it. In less than a month, Ji Tianqing had broken through from the 7th level of the sky origin stage to the 8th level. That was godly speed. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He bowed and said, "Uncle Yun, why have you summoned me? Come, sit down and talk." Yun Zhongqi gestured for him to sit down. After he sat down, Yun Zhongqi smiled and said, "Tianqing, I have discussed with your father yesterday. We have decided to set your wedding date on the 9th day of the 11th month. That day is an auspicious day, and it is the best day for you to get married. It also means that your love will last forever." Ji Tianqing was surprised. He smiled and asked, "Uncle, the date is so close. There are only 2 months left. Do we have enough time to prepare?" Yun Zhongqi nodded and said, 2 months is enough. Cloud Soul Palace has already started to prepare. Also, when you and Yao Yao get married, you must hold a grand banquet in Zhongzhou City. It must be a grand banquet. Ji Tianqing was looking forward to it. He nodded and said, "Since uncle and my father have already discussed it, then it is settled." "Thank you, uncle." Yun Zhongqi smiled and didn't say anything. Then, he talked about the second matter. The situation in Zhongzhou City has been getting more and more chaotic. The demonic goo has been causing chaos in the hundreds of cities. The citizens are in a state of panic. The aftermath of the Duanwu clan's destruction has been suppressed by Cloud Soul Palace. However, Cloud Soul Palace can't do anything about the demonic goo. The lords of the various cities and the imperial court are doing their best to suppress it, but they can't get rid of the vicious demonic goo. Ji Tianqing immediately thought of Yun Yao when he mentioned the situation in Zhongzhou and the demonic goo. He asked Yun Zhongqi, "Uncle, didn't the imperial residents send the imperial princes out on missions? Yao Yao was sent to Yuejian City. How is she doing? Is there any news?" Yun Zhongqi's expression became serious. He revealed a worried look and said in a deep voice, "In the past half a month, Yao Yao contacted me a few times. The situation in Yuejian City is very chaotic. She is overseeing the situation in Yuejian City, but there is little effect. Not only that, but she has lost more than half of her subordinates. The day before yesterday, she even asked me to send a few elites from the Hidden Cloud Pavilion to help her." "What? Is the situation this bad?" Ji Tianqing was shocked, and his heart was filled with worry. He frowned and thought for a moment. Then, he said in a serious tone, "Uncle, my father is temporarily staying in Cloud Soul Palace. Please take care of him. I want to rush to Yuejian City immediately to help Yao Yao take care of the situation in case she is in danger." Yun Zhongqi nodded and said, "That's why I called you here. Since that's the case, you should hurry and meet up with her." Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time. After bowing and bidding farewell, he turned and walked out of the study. Chapter 852. Yuejian City was 8,000 miles away from Cloud Spirit Palace. It was a human city with hundreds of years of history. The surrounding area of the city was rich in a spirit flower called the moon primrose, so it was named Yuejian City. Although Ji Tianqing had never been to Yuejian City, he had heard of its reputation. He knew that it was a beautiful ancient city surrounded by a sea of flowers. The scenery was so pleasant that it made people forget to leave. While flying, he was still silently speculating about the current situation in Yuejian City. How was Yun Yao's situation? Was her life in danger? Ever since the demonic vermin broke out in the hundreds of cities in Zhongzhou, he had not personally checked the situation in each city. He had only heard that the situation in Zhongzhou was chaotic, but he did not know how serious the situation in each city was. Although Yun Yao was a genius, she had just reached the Sky Origin stage a few months ago and was only at the second level of the Sky Origin stage. He could not help but worry that if Yun Yao encountered those demon kings, would her life be in danger? The night passed quickly. When dawn broke, he arrived outside Yuejian City. He was still dozens of miles away when he looked down from the sky and saw the scene inside and outside Yuejian City. There were plains in all four directions outside the city, which had been cultivated into medicinal fields for the moon primrose. There were thousands of acres of plains. Originally, there was a sea of pink and pale yellow flowers outside the city, and the fresh fragrance of the flowers could be smelled from hundreds of miles away. But now, the medicinal fields outside the city had been destroyed, and the sea of flowers had been turned into ruins. The ground was full of ravines and cracks, and there were also huge pits. Those were obviously the traces left behind by powerful cultivators after a great battle. The once fragrant sea of flowers had disappeared, and the ground outside Yuejian City was a mess. Ji Tianqing had a bad premonition, and his mood and expression were very heavy. He landed outside the city gates from the sky and saw that the city gates were tightly shut and heavily guarded. There were more than 30 black armored guards on both sides of the city gates, all of them wearing armor and carrying swords, exuding a murderous aura. It was early in the morning, and there were a few caravans and a dozen or so commoners gathered at the city gates, quietly waiting for the city gates to open. Ji Tianqing frowned and walked to the city gate. Two black armored guards immediately stopped him and said in a cold voice, "It's not time yet. The city gate won't open. Step back." Ji Tianqing frowned. He flipped his hand and took out the martial monarch badge. "I'm Crown Prince Ji Tianqing." When the two guards saw the emperor's token and heard his words, they immediately knelt down respectfully. The 30 or so guards on both sides of the city gate also knelt down on one knee and paid their respects to him. After the salute, the guard captain hurriedly came forward and respectfully said, "This lowly one pays his respects to young Master Ji." Ji Tianqing put away the emperor's token and looked at him with a dignified expression. He asked, "Tell me, what happened in the city?" The captain of the guards didn't dare to hide anything and quickly answered truthfully, reporting to young Master Ji, "There has been a demonic parasite wreaking havoc in the city recently, causing the people to suffer. In the past month, more than 20 young elites have successively been poisoned by the demonic parasite. They have gone on a killing spree in the city and cruelly poisoned more than 2,000 people. The people in the city are in a state of panic. The Devil clan also took the opportunity to wreak havoc and slaughter the people outside the city. Fortunately, the imperial residents sent young Master Yun Yao to take charge of the situation in the city lord's mansion. Only then did the people calm down. Young Master Yun Yao ordered the city to be under martial law. The city gate will be opened at 4:45 a.m. every day and closed at 4:45 p.m. in the evening. After listening to the guard captain's report, Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said in a solemn tone, "In that case, we'll follow young Master Yun Yao's orders. I'll enter the city myself and go to the city lord's mansion to find young Master Yun Yao." After saying that, he leaped into the sky and jumped onto the city wall. The huge Tianyuan array protected the entire Yuejian city and enveloped the city walls on all sides. However, this wasn't a problem for him at all. He just used a little trick and opened a gap in the array. Swoosh! His figure flashed through the gap in the array and flew into Yuejian City. The gap in the array quickly healed on its own. The many guards, merchants, and people at the city gate all showed deep admiration and reverence when they saw his figure flying into the sky and burrowing into the ground. In recent months, the name Ji Tianqing could be said to have reverberated like thunder in his ears. Many people had heard of his reputation and deeds. They immediately whispered to each other and let out waves of exclamations. The guards guarding the city gate were also excited to see him with their own eyes. His personal visit to Yuejian City also made the guards feel more secure and more at ease. Ji Tianqing flew above Yuejian City and went straight to the city lord's mansion. Along the way, he saw that the streets and alleys were deserted. There were no peddlers hawking, nor were there any people strolling on the streets. The doors of the various shops were tightly shut and looked very desolate. Some of the buildings were even damaged. There were traces of fighting and some dilapidated walls. Seeing this scene, it wasn't difficult for Ji Tianqing to guess that there must have been many fights in the city before. Not long after, he descended outside the gates of the city lord's mansion. The city lord's mansion was also heavily guarded and tightly guarded. After he reported his identity, the guards guarding the gate immediately went to the mansion to report the news. Someone led him into the mansion and headed to the guest hall. He sat in the hall for a moment when footsteps came from outside the door. A man and a woman were walking quickly into the hall. The first to step into the hall was a beautiful woman in a white dress. It was his fiancée, Yunyao. After not seeing her for half a month, Yunyao's temperament was as cold as ever, like a fairy from the ninth heaven. However, her brows and eyes were filled with fatigue and worry. The man behind her was a middle-aged expert in his early 40s with a tall and sturdy figure. This person was dressed luxuriously and had a dignified bearing. He was the city lord of Yuejian City. After Yunyao entered the hall, her eyes stared at Ji Tianqing and hurriedly called out, "Tianqing, you're finally back. During this period of time, I've been worried about you every day." Ji Tianqing hurriedly went up to her and held her hand. He revealed a gentle smile, "Yao Yao, I said that I'll be fine. When have I ever broken my promise to you? On the other hand, you've worked so hard for Yuejian City. It's been hard on you for the past half a month." The two of them looked at each other with deep tenderness. Their hearts were connected and they were worried about each other. The city lord of Yuejian City tactfully lowered his head and looked elsewhere. He remained silent so as not to disturb the two of them. After a while, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao talked to each other and their emotions calmed down. Yunyao introduced him and the city lord of Yuejian City. She introduced them to each other. "Tianqing, this is Yuejian City's city lord Yi. City lord Yi, this is the famous Prince Ji Tianqing of the central state. He's the Tianjin region lord and also my future husband." The city lord of Yuejian City's eyes lit up. He looked at Ji Tianqing with admiration. He bowed respectfully and said, "Young Master Ji, this one has heard of your great name." Chapter 853. For city lord Yi, Ji Tianqing was the person he worshipped the most. This prodigy prince had too much glory and halo on him. He was simply a legendary figure who could only be heard of but rarely seen in person. Ji Tianqing's sudden visit to Yuejian City made him feel flattered and inexplicably excited. "City lord Yi, you don't have to be so polite. I came to Yuejian City this time only to visit my fiancée and help her solve her problems." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, "I see that the situation in Yuejian City is tense. Why don't we get down to business first?" His confidence, elegance, and calmness made City Lord Yi admire him even more. City Lord Yi hurriedly made a "please" gesture and said respectfully, "Young Master Ji, please take a seat. Please allow me to slowly report to you." Ji Tianqing nodded and sat down with Yunyao, listening to City Lord Ye's report. In the past month, the demonic parasite chaos in the city has become more and more intense. 26 young talents have successively been infected by the demonic parasites. After being infected, they became bloodthirsty and cruel demonic parasite puppets and went on a killing spree in the city. 14 grand clans were destroyed, and some of them were even completely wiped out. After the news spread, it caused great panic in the city. The city lord manor did their best to investigate and caught more than a dozen puppets infected with demonic parasites. After forcibly extracting the parasites, those people died one after another. After Miss Yunyao came to take charge of the situation, she caught 7 more puppets in a row and dealt with all of them. Moreover, Miss Yunyao ordered the entire city to be under martial law, making it difficult for the demons to sneak into the city to sow demonic parasites. Not only that, Miss Yunyao also sent out a large number of experts to investigate suspicious people in the city. So far, there are more than 100 suspicious people locked up in the city lord manor's prison. Miss Yunyao's series of measures were very effective. As expected, the situation in the city has stabilized a lot. There are no new demonic parasite puppets appearing. City Lord Yi gave a general overview of the city's situation. His words were full of admiration and respect for Yunyao. Obviously, Yunyao's actions in this half a month of time in Yuejian City had long since subdued him, causing him to submit willingly. After hearing this, Ji Tianxing frowned doubtfully and asked, City Lord Yi, if the situation is really like this, the crisis in Yuejian City has been mostly eliminated. The situation should be stabilized, right? This, City Lord Yi hesitated for a moment, looking hesitant. Yunyao explained to Ji Tianxing, Tianxing, there's something you don't know. Not only hasn't the city's situation has not improved, but it's worse. The city lord's mansion and I have eliminated 24 demonic venomous puppets, but these demonic venomous puppets were discovered early and were relatively weak, so it was not difficult to deal with them. However, there are still 2 or 3 fish that escaped the net that we haven't found yet. They are still roaming around outside causing trouble. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, 2 or 3? What do you mean? Yunyao hurriedly explained, there's a person whose situation is a little special, and I can't determine it for the time being. This person was Chao Jingfeng, the eldest son of the Chao family in the eastern city and one of the 3 martial arts geniuses in Yuejian City. A month ago, the entire Chao clan was massacred overnight. All 84 people were killed and turned into white bones. Everyone thought that the Chao family had been killed by the demonic venomous puppets. They sighed and were shocked. However, after I checked the records of the city lord's mansion, I found out that the Chao family originally had 85 people. Upon hearing this, Ji Tianxing vaguely understood something and said in a deep voice, the Chao family has 85 people, but there are only 84 corpses here. Therefore, one of them is still alive. That person didn't survive. Perhaps he's the puppet that was poisoned by the demonic goo, Chao Jingfeng. Yes. Yunyao nodded and continued, after that, I found it strange, so I used the soul imprinting lamp and the secret technique to identify those skeletons. After some investigation, I realized that the missing person was Chao Jingfeng. I suspect that he was poisoned by the demonic goo and killed everyone in the Chao family after he went crazy. However, I still couldn't find him. Ji Tianxing nodded and silently noted this down. Yao Yao, continue. Yunyao continued, other than Chao Jingfeng, the other 2 escaped and became demonic goo puppets for a long time. After they killed countless people, their strength has increased by several times. I once led the guards of the city lord's mansion to capture a demonic goo puppet. However, he escaped after killing a large number of guards. Moreover, even I was no match for him. Upon hearing this, Ji Tianxing's expression became more serious. He frowned slightly and said, after the demonic goo puppet devours flesh and souls, its strength will continue to increase. It can even split and reproduce. If the 2 demonic goo puppets kill more people, their strength will only increase. It's very likely that they can create more demonic goo puppets. Yunyao nodded and said in a serious tone, "That's right, that's right. I suspect that the number of demonic goo puppets roaming outside is still increasing. We must get rid of the 2 demonic goo puppets as soon as possible. We can't let them continue to grow stronger or they will only harm more people. Now, the city is heavily guarded and patrolled. The situation is still considered stable. However, there are many villages outside the city. The city lord's mansion's military strength is unable to protect them. The situation is very dangerous. Just 2 nights ago, thousands of people in Wild South Village were killed overnight. Even the chickens, ducks, and livestock were all killed. Last night, the 2 villages 100 miles away from Wild South Village were also killed overnight. They were also burned to ashes by fire. I suspect that these 2 tragedies are related to the 3 demonic goo puppets roaming around. However, I can't do anything about it now. I don't know how to capture the 3 demonic goo puppets." Ji Tianqing nodded and said in a serious tone, "The 3 demonic goo puppets are hiding outside the city. It's really difficult to find them. According to what you said, the 3 demonic goo puppets are not only very strong, but they also have evolved to a certain extent. They know how to hide during the day and attack at night. This is very difficult to deal with. Since it's difficult for the city lord's mansion's military strength to protect all the villages, then send experts and soldiers to escort the people to the city in batches. No matter how strong the 3 demonic goo puppets are, they won't dare to attack the army openly. We must first ensure the safety of the city and let the people have a place to live. Then, we will think of ways to search for them." After hearing this, Yunyao thought for a moment and explained, "Tianqing, I have thought of this method before. However, there are 12 towns and hundreds of villages under Yujian City's jurisdiction. It's almost impossible to transfer all the people to the city. Moreover, all the people add up to nearly 200,000 people. The city lord's mansion can't settle them at all." Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment, then said, "Since we can't transfer all of them, then transfer the people from the villages to the towns first. Send as many soldiers as possible to guard the towns. If we really can't station soldiers in the towns and villages, then transfer the people to the city." "Yes, that's the only way." Yunyao nodded in agreement and immediately gave the order to City Lord Yi. City Lord Yi didn't dare to be negligent. After receiving the order, he immediately left the guest hall and went to carry out the order. After he left, only Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were left in the hall. After discussing official matters, the 2 started to talk about private matters. Yunyao looked at Ji Tianqing and asked with concern, "Tianqing, how is uncle's situation? Did you find that treasure?" Ji Tianqing nodded and revealed a smile, "I have already obtained the heaven mending pearl. Master used the heaven mending pearl to heal my father's injuries." Chapter 854. When Yunyao learned that the wedding date had been set, a hint of shyness appeared in her eyes, and her heartbeat sped up. Why is the date so close? Can it be ready in 2 months? She lowered her head slightly, her cheeks were slightly red, and her voice was filled with shyness. Ji Tianqing held her slender waist and said with a smile, "Uncle said that the Cloud Spirit Palace has already begun preparations, and 2 months is enough. Moreover, I also want to marry you as soon as possible and fulfill my long-cherished wish." Long-cherished wish? Yunyao raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a complicated expression. She asked, "We have known each other for less than 2 years, so how can it be considered a long-cherished wish?" Ji Tianqing revealed a playful smile and whispered in her ear, "From the first time I saw you, I thought in my heart that one day, I will definitely marry you as my wife." The gentle whisper sounded in her ear, and the warm air brushed against her sparkling earlobes, which immediately turned her earlobes red. It was very cute. A thick sense of shyness welled up in her heart, causing her to lower her head in embarrassment. She whispered in a trembling voice, "Tianqing, when you first saw me, you already had such thoughts. Of course. Ji Tianqing said with certainty, although I was a toad at that time, and you were a noble swan, however, a toad that doesn't want to eat a swan is not a good toad. After saying that, he stretched out his arms and wrapped them around Yun Yao's slender waist, hugging her tightly in his arms. Yun Yao became even more embarrassed. She nestled in his arms, and her heart was filled with complicated thoughts. Looking back on the past year, all the things that had happened between the two of them made her filled with emotions. After a long time, the two of them separated. The two of them left the guest hall and rushed to Yun Yao's study, where they continued to discuss the matter of Yuejian City. 4 hours later, it was noon. Ji Tianqing left the city lord's mansion alone and rushed to the Chao mansion in the East City to personally check the situation. The Chao clan was one of the grand clans in Yuejian City. With a heritage of over 300 years, their power was not to be underestimated. Moreover, the Chao family had been like the sun in the sky in recent decades. There were many talented people in the family, and the family business was very prosperous. Sadly, at the peak of the Chao clan's glory, this tragedy happened. The 80+ people in the clan were all killed. It was truly a tragedy. This matter caused a huge uproar in the city, causing countless commoners' expressions to change as they talked about it. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the Chao residence, he saw that the huge residence was surrounded by city guards. No one dared to approach the manor. Occasionally, there would be commoners who would pass by, but they would try their best to stay away from the Chao manor. They would walk away quickly with fearful expressions. The magnificent estate was deathly silent, and it was suffused with traces of a ghastly and terrifying aura. Even though it was broad daylight, it still made people feel uneasy and panicked. Ji Tianqing walked to the gate of the Chao mansion and was stopped by 4 city guards. This place has been sealed by the city lord's residence. Without the city lord's residence's order, no one is allowed to enter. I'm the crown prince, Ji Tianqing. I'm here to investigate. He took out his identity token and said in a dignified voice. The 4 city guards' expressions changed. They immediately bowed respectfully and opened the gate for him. Ji Tianqing stepped through the gate and walked into the Chao residence. As soon as he entered, he saw a spacious front yard. There were a few Chinese parasol trees in the yard. They were 30 meters tall and were at least 100 years old. The wide canopy almost covered the entire front yard, blocking the noon sun and making the yard a little shady. Under a Chinese parasol tree that was as thick as a water tank, there was a pile of white bones. There was also a waist saber and half a set of armor on the ground. Ji Tianqing glanced at it and could tell that it was the skeleton of a middle-aged man. He should be a guard of the Chao residence. There was an ancient well in the corner of the yard. There was a circle of bluestone around the well. The winch at the mouth of the well was intact. There was even a well rope and a bucket hanging from it. However, there was a pile of white bones, an embroidered sachet, and a pair of embroidered shoes beside the well. Ji Tianqing walked through the front yard expressionlessly. He looked around calmly and saw one skeleton after another. Ever since the tragedy in the Chao residence, the city lord's residence had sent troops to seal off this place and did not allow outsiders to enter. The scene in the Chao residence was still the same as before. When Ji Tianqing saw those skeletons, some images vaguely appeared in his mind. He could roughly guess the scene of the incident. The main yard had the most people living in it, and it also had the most skeletons. Especially outside the main hall of the Chao residence, there were more than 20 piles of skeletons scattered on both sides of the bluestone steps and the main road. There were men and women, old and young, but the way they died was similar. They had all been devoured by the demonic venomous puppets and turned into piles of white bones on the ground. Ji Tianqing walked around the Chao residence and found a total of 84 skeletons. Some of the skeletons were lying in hidden places like the woodshed and the cellar. If Yun Yao did not tell him the exact number of people in the Chao family, he would not be surprised. From the looks of it, the Chao family had met with an unexpected calamity and was wiped out overnight. However, the eldest young master of the Chao family, Chao Jingfeng's body was not there, and his whereabouts had been unknown for a month. After Ji Tianqing investigated the situation in the Chao residence, he was 80% sure that the person who killed the Chao family was Chao Jingfeng. A young man with a bright future was turned into a demonic puppet that only knew how to kill. He killed everyone in his family, including his own parents and siblings, vicious demonic venomous insects, damned demons. He clenched his fists secretly, anger and murderous intent building up in his chest. He could not wait to tear the demonic king and all the demons into pieces. At this moment, he suddenly frowned and revealed a puzzled look. He could vaguely feel that there was a warm feeling in his head, as if something was burning in his mind. However, he did not feel any discomfort, and the temperature on his forehead was very normal. There was nothing unusual. He hurriedly used his spiritual sense to look inside and saw that the heaven-mending pearl in his mind was shining with a dense white light, emitting an invisible mysterious power. The heaven-mending pearl is reacting as expected. However, is this some kind of omen? This thought flashed through his mind, and he walked around the Chao residence twice with a heart full of doubts. However, the abnormal reaction of the heaven-mending pearl did not disappear, and it was still shining with a dense white light. However, he did not find any clues, and he did not understand what was going on. The heaven-mending pearl was too mysterious and powerful. He knew nothing about its effects and secrets. Helpless, he could only temporarily leave the Chao residence and return to the city lord's mansion. When he returned to the city lord's mansion, the heaven-mending pearl had calmed down and was no longer shining with a white light. Seeing this scene, he was sure that the heaven-mending pearl's strange phenomenon had something to do with the Chao residence. Other than the fact that the Chao residence was wiped out by the demonic venomous insect puppet, there was nothing special about it. Chapter 855. Late at night, the night sky was as dark as ink, without any stars or moon. Curfew had long been in effect in Yujian City. The city was pitch black, with only a few places lit up. All the streets and alleys in the city were closed. Even the brothels, taverns, and gambling houses that were only lively at night were closed for the day. In the huge Yujian city, very few people came out except for the patrolling city guards. The atmosphere in the city was solemn and oppressive. Even the night sky seemed to be shrouded in a layer of haze, making it hard for the people to breathe and full of fear and worry. In the city lord's mansion, Yun Yao's study was still lit. She was still busy in the study, dealing with official business in the city. Ever since she came to Yujian City, she had been busy every day for half a month. She had to work until late at night before she could rest. Especially today, when Ji Tianqing proposed to move the people in the villages outside the city into the city. This was a major matter that had to be handled carefully. She was bent over the table, reviewing the memorials and files on the table. Sometimes she would write quickly, and sometimes she would frown in deep thought. Obviously, she was completely immersed in her work. She worked hard for the people of Yujian City and only wanted to maintain the city's peace. 100 steps away from the study was Ji Tianqing's residence. As Yun Yao's fiancé, he had come to the city lord's mansion. Of course, he had to live with Yun Yao. Of course, it was just living in the same courtyard. Their rooms were facing each other, separated by a wide courtyard. Although it was late at night, Ji Tianqing was not resting. He was standing by the window, looking at the study opposite, watching Yun Yao's busy figure through the window. Yao Yao, you are indeed beautiful on the outside and intelligent on the inside, cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The world thinks of you as an otherworldly fairy who doesn't care about the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the human world and the suffering of the common people. Only I know that you are kind-hearted, pure, and flawless. You even have the love to help the common people. He murmured in his heart, his eyes full of tenderness, and a gentle smile on his lips. Even if the world is in chaos, and the demon emperor is causing trouble, I will protect you and never let you come to harm. The devil emperor was a threat to the world, so I killed him. The demons run amok and harm the people of Li. I will wipe them out. Thinking of this, he secretly clenched his fists, an unyielding pride surging in his chest. Unknowingly, he had already stood by the window for an hour. Just as he was about to turn around and return to his bed to meditate, he suddenly felt a warm sensation in his mind. That familiar feeling appeared once again. He hurriedly used his spiritual sense to investigate and found that the heaven-mending orb in his mind was flickering with white light again, like a rising flame. He could clearly sense that the heaven-mending orb was emitting a mysterious, formless power that was extending into the night sky. The heaven-mending orb is reacting again. Could it be that something is going to happen in the city lord's mansion? Ji Tianqing muttered in his heart, and hurriedly calmed his mind to sense the changes in the heaven-mending orb. Very quickly, his soul began to throb as a thought appeared in his mind. Yujian, south of the city. He didn't understand why either. He only felt that the heaven-mending orb seemed to be guiding him, conveying some kind of thought to him. Thus, he quietly walked out of the room and prepared to go to the south to take a look. In order not to alarm Yun Yao and the guards of the city lord's mansion, he silently flew into the night sky and rushed south as fast as lightning. Swoosh! He sped through the night and saw that the southern part of the city was as dark as ink, without any movement. He immediately understood that the heaven-mending orb wasn't guiding him to the southern part of the city, but to the south of Yujian City. Thus, he flew over the southern city gate, left Yujian City, and continued to fly south. Outside the southern gate of Yujian City was a plain with a radius of several dozen miles. It was originally a medicinal field where the moon primrose was planted. However, the medicinal field had long been reduced to ruins. Even under the dark night sky, one could clearly see the ravines and pits on the ground. Ji Tianqing crossed the plain with a radius of several dozen miles and continued to fly south. Soon, he crossed a mountain range and entered a group of mountains. The mountains around Yujian City were not tall, and the mountain slopes were also relatively low. There were many plains and valleys in the mountains, and there were many small towns and villages. Ji Tianqing flew above the mountains and hurried on his way while paying attention to the heaven-mending orb's reaction. He quickly discovered that the further south he flew, the stronger the warm feeling in his mind, and the greater the heaven-mending orb's reaction. It seems that I'm getting closer and closer to the place the heaven-mending orb is guiding me to. An hour later, he had flown more than 300 miles, crossed several mountain ranges, and passed several villages. When he crossed another mountain range, he saw a long and narrow valley behind the mountain. In the valley with a radius of several dozen miles, there was a small town. This was the town furthest away from Yujian City, called Moonfall Town. The town was not large, and there were only 2,000 households, with a population of about 7,000 to 8,000 people. Half a month ago, the city lord's mansion had sent a group of city guards to station in this town. Although there were only 100 city guards, it was barely enough to guard this town. Under the dark night sky, the town was very quiet, and only a few scattered lights were lit. The 4 entrances of the town were guarded by more than 10 city guards. There was also a patrol team of more than 10 people, who were wearing armor and carrying swords, patrolling the town through the night. For the past 2 months, Moonfall Town had been very peaceful, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. This place was rather far from Yujian City, and was less affected by the demonic venomous puppets, so the townspeople were rather peaceful. However, when Ji Tianqing arrived in the sky above Moonfall Town, he frowned and muttered to himself in a low voice, according to the heaven-mending orb's guidance, this is the place. He used a secret technique to hide his presence, and quietly hid in the night sky above the town, overlooking the entire town from above. Although the night was dark, he could still see the entire town clearly after using the pure mind Dharma eye. The rows of houses and streets, as well as the few luxurious mansions in the town, all fell into his eyes. The stray cats and dogs that roamed the town at night, as well as the city guards patrolling the town, were all clearly seen by him. He hid in the night sky, patiently observing the situation in Moonfall Town, and silently waited. Suddenly, he noticed a black shadow darting out of a mansion on the east side of the town. The black shadow cut through the night sky like a gust of wind, and left the mansion in the blink of an eye, entering a small alley. This person was very agile and moved very quickly. He was also dressed in black, so he was very hidden in the night. He silently passed through the streets and alleys, and flew out of the town, looking very suspicious. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing was high up in the sky, so he could see everything. A Heaven Prime expert who can fly actually appeared in a town of a few thousand people. Something's wrong. He frowned, and without hesitation, he chased after the black shadow. Chapter 856. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry to show himself. He followed behind the black shadow, maintaining a distance of 100 feet. His spiritual sense could cover a radius of 1,000 meters, so he was not afraid of the black shadow escaping. When he followed the black shadow out of the town and flew in the sky, he found that the black shadow was a little strange. From the appearance, it was a tall young man wearing a black robe and carrying a quilt on his shoulder. The quilt was bulging, as if it was hiding a person. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned as he roughly guessed what was going on. Could it be that the black-robed man is a demon disguised as a human, taking advantage of the night to kidnap the young elites of the town and bring them back to the demon cave to plant the demon insects? Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He decided not to make a move first. After following the black-robed man to the demon cave, he would see if the black-robed man had any accomplices and then kill them all. After a while, the black-robed man flew to the mountain peak east of the town and quickly went into the forest. In the depths of the forest, there was a pile of rocks, and the rocks covered a cave. The black-robed man carried the quilt into the cave and blocked the entrance with a millstone. But Ji Tianqing followed closely and directly used the earth escape technique to enter the cave. This cave was not big, only 20 square meters, and there were traces of man-made excavation. There were a few huge bluestones scattered in the cave, but there was no secret room, stone bench, stone chair, or other things. It looked very simple and primitive. Ji Tianqing hid in the corner of the cave and secretly sized it up. He could not help but be puzzled. Such a simple and crude demon cave. There is not even a formation in the cave. It doesn't seem to make sense. He carefully observed again and immediately made a new discovery. There was a huge pile of bones under a millstone in the southeast corner of the cave. The pile was more than 3 meters high. He roughly estimated that there were at least 30 skeletons. At this moment, the black-robed man carried the quilt to the corner of the cave and threw the quilt on the millstone. After the quilt scattered, a young man in his 20s rolled out of the quilt. This young man wore a brocade robe, and his entire body was suffused with a true essence aura. He was actually an Origin Core realm martial artist. However, this person was lying on the ground unconscious. Clearly, he was in a coma. The black-robed man stood where he was. He lowered his head and stared at the young warrior. Then, he slowly lifted his sleeves. Then, he opened his mouth and let out a muffled roar. Suddenly, he stretched out his hands. A dark red mist suddenly spewed out of his mouth, enveloping the young martial artist on the ground. Seeing this familiar scene, Ji Tianqing's body shook and he immediately understood everything. It turned out that the black-robed man did not want to sow demonic parasites, but wanted to devour the young martial artist's flesh and soul. The black-robed man was not a devil, but a devil-venomous insect puppet. The dark red fog was about to engulf the young martial artist and turn him into a skeleton. At this critical juncture, Ji Tianqing brazenly made his move, waving his palm and sending out a sharp golden sword light towards the black-robed man. At the same time, he rushed to the corner of the cave like a stream of light, wanting to rescue the young martial artist. Whoosh! The 3-foot-long golden sword light instantly cut through the dark night sky and stabbed to the side of the black-robed man. He actually sensed that something was wrong and immediately retracted the dark red fog. His figure flashed and he moved 10 meters away. Swoosh! The golden sword light that was as fast as a stream of light was actually dodged by him. The sword light brushed past his shoulder and ruthlessly nailed into the rock wall of the cave. It blasted a large hole in the hard rock wall with a muffled bang. Although Ji Tianqing's sword strike missed, he forced the black-robed man to retreat and successfully rescued the young martial artist. He rushed to the corner of the cave, stretched out his hand, and grabbed the unconscious young warrior in his hand. At this time, the black-robed man glared at him and let out an angry roar. Roar! The roar that was filled with a tyrannical aura reverberated violently in the cave. The black-robed man's eyes were like 2 balls of crimson flames. His face and skin were suffused with a light purple color and thick fur had grown out. Especially his mouth. It was flat and wide with blood stains. His teeth were as sharp as a beast's and there were 2 sharp fangs in his mouth. Although he still looked like a human, his face and appearance had turned into a ferocious demon. Ji Tianqing stared at him and slightly opened his eyes. He was astonished. Could it be that the demonic worm in his body has evolved? Is that why he looks like this and has developed some intelligence? At this moment, the black-robed man suddenly raised both of his palms and slapped out 2 balls of purple flame toward Jian Wushuang fiercely. Jian Wushuang immediately realized that the black-robed man had reached the 5th level of the Sky Origin stage. The 2 balls of purple flame that were as big as wash basins were powerful enough to destroy half of the mountain. At this critical moment, he held the unconscious young martial artist in his right hand and slapped out a flaming sword light with his left hand without hesitation. Red Dragon Flash. The 10-meter-long flaming sword light was like a flaming dragon. It carried the power to destroy the world and fiercely hit the black-robed man. Bang! Amidst the deafening noise, the crimson flame greatsword fiercely struck the 2 balls of brilliant purple flames. The 2 fireballs exploded with a bang, bursting into purple flames that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. The red flame sword didn't slow down at all. It hit the black-robed man again and blew him away. He hit the wall of the cave. After that, the power of the red flame sword exploded and broke the cave into pieces. Boom! An earth-shattering sound echoed in the dark night sky. It startled the people within dozens of miles. Endless purple flames and crimson flames blasted the entire mountain into pieces, causing it to collapse into a pile of ruins. Dust and gravel mixed with purple flames and crimson flames illuminated the night sky within a radius of dozens of kilometers. At that moment, the mountains and the land within hundreds of miles were shaking. The citizens of Moonset Town were all startled awake from their dreams, letting out cries of terror. Flames lit up in the town, and noises of people could be heard. There were also a few city guard experts who rushed to the ruins at lightning speed, wanting to see what had happened. Swoosh! A figure in a white robe suddenly flew out from the dust and flames. He was none other than Ji Tianqing. His entire body was unscathed, and he was even carrying the unconscious young martial artist in his hand. He stood thousands of feet high in the sky and frowned as he looked down at the ruins. His eyes were sharp as lightning as he looked around. Damn the demonic venomous puppet. It has evolved to such a powerful level. It didn't die from my sword strike. Although the mountain was in ruins and the world was in chaos, he couldn't see anything clearly. But he knew that the black-robed man wasn't killed in one strike. He was only severely injured. Chapter 857. Ji Tianqing was high up in the night sky, using his Sushin Dharma eye to look down at the ruins. His eyes were like lightning as he released his spiritual sense to cover an area of 1,000 meters. The man in black robe was strange, but he was only in sky origin stage. There was no way he could escape from Jian Wushuang. After a while, a wisp of black fog floated out from the ruins of the mountain. The black fog floated silently in the night sky, drifting away into the distance with the smoke and dust that filled the sky. After it floated out for 1,000 meters, it saw that there was no danger around, so it sped up and ran away as fast as lightning. Swoosh! The black fog condensed into an arrow and flew away from the ruins in the blink of an eye, heading deep into the mountains. At the same time, Ji Tianqing noticed it in the sky. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Humph! Strange indeed. However, it's impossible for you to escape from my grasp. As he spoke, he chased after the black fog. Whoosh! Although he was carrying an unconscious young cultivator, it did not affect his speed at all. His body was glowing with golden light. He was like a golden meteor flying across the night sky, leaving a golden arc in the night sky. After a few breaths, he caught up with the black fog. They were less than 300 meters away. He waved his hand and slashed out a huge golden sword towards the black fog. Swoosh! The huge golden sword slashed across the night sky and hit the black fog. The black fog was cut into two halves. The two halves of the black fog fell from the sky and landed on the mountain below. After they landed, the two halves of the black fog gathered together and turned back into the man in black robe. He was badly injured. He was lying on the grass on the mountain peak, panting heavily. He only had half of his body left. His left arm and leg were gone. Half of his bloody face looked even more ferocious. However, the blood flowing out of his body was black demon blood. His bones were glowing with purple light. If he was a normal sky origin stage cultivator, he would have been dead by now. However, the man in black robe did not seem to feel any pain. He did not care about his injuries. He roared angrily, uttering syllables that no one could understand. He struggled to get up from the grass and tried to escape again. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing arrived. He descended from the sky and landed on the mountain peak, appearing in front of the black-robed man. When he saw the black-robed man's injuries, his pupils suddenly shrank, revealing a look of great surprise. He's still alive after suffering such heavy injuries. I want to see just how strong the evolved demonic goo is. As he spoke, he stretched out his left hand to grab the black-robed man. His left hand surged with golden light, condensing into a giant golden palm the size of a millstone, and immediately grabbed the black-robed man. The black-robed man was caught by the giant golden palm. He struggled and roared, but it was useless. He couldn't escape at all. Ji Tianqing placed the unconscious young martial artist on the ground and slowly raised his right hand. He released a mysterious black hole and pressed it on the back of the black-robed man. The mysterious black light burst forth with an incomparably powerful devouring power, and quickly sucked out the demonic goo from the black-robed man's body. Swoosh! A pitch-black demonic goo the size of half a palm suddenly appeared in Ji Tianqing's palm, wrapped in a mass of golden light. This demonic goo's appearance was ferocious and ugly. It actually had 2 heads, a fat body, and 4 pairs of wings. Its strength was very strong. It struggled desperately, madly twisting its body, opened its mouth, and gnawed the golden light into pieces. This was the demonic goo, the evolved demonic goo. After the demonic goo in the black-robed man's body was extracted, it immediately stopped struggling and roaring. Like a deflated balloon, it quickly shrank and shrank. In just a few short breaths, he collapsed into a ball of skin, weathered into a pile of black ashes, and dissipated between heaven and earth. Only a tattered black robe was left on the grass, proving that the black-robed man had once existed. Ji Tianqing glanced at the tattered black robe, then withdrew his gaze and carefully stared at the demonic goo in his palm. This demonic goo's size and strength are several times larger than the ones I've seen before. Moreover, this demonic goo has grown 2 heads, and seems to be about to split and reproduce. Fortunately, I caught this guy in time, or else a new demonic goo puppet would have appeared very quickly. The evolved demonic goo puppet not only had intelligence, but also knew how to escape and hide. It also had an almost immortal demonic body. The black-robed puppet just now was only at the 4th level of Sky Origin stage, but it took him so much effort to get rid of it. It was conceivable that an ordinary Sky Origin stage expert would not be able to deal with this black-robed puppet. I have to find the other 2 puppets as soon as possible to solve the crisis in Yuejian City. The situation in Yuejian City is so tense. The situation in the other cities in Zhongzhou must be the same. The evolved demonic goo puppet's destructive power and threat have increased by at least 10 times. These thoughts flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind, and his mood became heavier and more worried. After a while, he collected his thoughts and decided to put the demonic goo into the treasure box and bring it back to the governor's mansion to study. But at this moment, the heaven-mending pearl in his mind released a dense white light, which flowed along his right arm and out of his palm. Swoosh! The mysterious white light immediately wrapped around the demonic goo and rose up fiercely like a flame. The demonic goo immediately struggled and twisted crazily, and even let out screeching sounds. It was incomparably anxious and terrified. Ji Tianqing's face was full of astonishment. He stared at the mysterious white light and watched the demonic goo struggle and churn in the white light. Soon, the powerful and evil demonic goo was corroded by the mysterious white light and melted away. After a few breaths of time, the entire demonic goo disappeared into thin air, and not even a bit of powder was left. Only then did the mysterious white light calm down and quickly retract into the heaven-mending pearl. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and muttered in disbelief, "The heaven-mending pearl actually has this kind of effect? It destroyed the demonic goo so easily, purified it. Not destroyed, but purified, just like how light dispels darkness." The mysterious white light was sacred light, and the demonic goo was evil darkness. Previously, it was the heaven-mending pearl that guided me to Moonfall Town, so I could discover this evolved demonic goo puppet. Now that the heaven-mending pearl has purified the demonic goo, could it be that the heaven-mending pearl is the nemesis of the devil race and the demonic goo? The mysterious heaven-mending pearl, just how many more effects do you have that I don't know? Ji Tianqing muttered to himself, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a slight smile. His eyes were also filled with curiosity and anticipation. In order to verify the conjecture in his heart, he decided to immediately return to the governor's mansion and do something. Thus, he carried the unconscious young martial artist and turned around to leave the mountain peak. After returning to Moonfall Town, he quietly left the young martial artist in the town, and left Moonfall Town as fast as lightning, rushing back to Yuejian City. "Brothers, I'm very sorry, little he has to go out for a trip, and will be delayed for about 4 days. In these 4 days, I will update 4 times a day." Chapter 858. Ji Tianqing had been busy for half the night because of the matter in Moonfall Town. When he returned to the city lord's residence, it was already dawn. The city lord's residence was silent, and the guards were still on high alert. The study in Yun Yao's residence was still lit with a dim yellow light. She was still busy in the study, bending over the table to deal with official business as if she didn't know fatigue. Ji Tianqing came to the door of the study. The guard guarding the door was about to bow to him, but he quickly gestured for him to keep quiet. Then, he silently entered the study and quietly walked behind Yun Yao. Yun Yao was still focused on reviewing the files and didn't notice his arrival at all. He revealed a gentle smile and quietly reached out his arms to hug Yun Yao's slender waist and pulled her into his arms. Yun Yao was suddenly awakened. Her body stiffened and she instinctively wanted to fight back. But she immediately reacted. After knowing that the person who came was Ji Tianqing, she immediately relaxed her vigilance. "Tianqing, why are you here? What are you doing?" She turned to look at Ji Tianqing with a hint of confusion in her eyes. Ji Tianqing held her hands and rubbed his cheek against her pretty face. He smiled and said, Yao Yao, you forget to rest when you're busy. My heart aches when I see you working so hard. Tell me honestly, for the past half a month, have you been working like this every day? Yun Yao stammered in response. She felt touched and warm in her heart. But she was smart and immediately saw through the clues. She stared at Ji Tianqing and asked, Tianqing, did you also not sleep last night? Where did you go last night? From the looks of it, you seem to have been in a hurry, and you even fought. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, Yao Yao, I didn't expect that I couldn't hide this from you. You guessed right. I went to Moonfall Town last night. Moonfall Town? Yun Yao frowned slightly and asked in confusion, that's a remote town furthest away from Wuxia City. What are you doing there in the middle of the night? Ji Tianqing didn't hide it from her. He said to her through his spiritual sense, Yao Yao, I have a surprise for you. I just found it. The heaven-mending pearl I obtained in the buried star sea is a very mysterious divine item. Its effects are very strange. This divine item has fused with my soul. Last night, it resonated with me and guided me to Moonset Town. After I rushed to Moonfall Town, I discovered a black-robed man escaping from the town. He was even carrying an unconscious young warrior. Hearing this, Yun Yao immediately revealed a surprised expression, the heaven-mending pearl actually has such a miraculous effect. That black-robed man is definitely from the devil race. He wants to plant devil goo on that young martial artist, right? Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head, I thought so too at first, but he isn't from the devil race. After I chased him into a cave, I discovered that he was actually a devil goo puppet that wanted to devour the young martial artist's flesh and soul. He told Yun Yao everything that had happened. After Yun Yao heard this, she felt that it was inconceivable. Her clear eyes were filled with excitement. Tianqing, the heaven-mending pearl is actually so miraculous. It can even purify devil goo. That's right. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, the heaven-mending pearl is an ancient divine item. No one knows how powerful it is or what other effects it has. But what I can be sure of is that this divine item is most likely the nemesis of devil goo and the devil race. Although the evolved devil goo is very powerful and the devil goo puppet is very difficult to deal with, I have the heaven-mending pearl in my hands. I can quickly get rid of them. That's great. Yun Yao was also excited and said with a heart full of excitement, Tianqing, if the heaven-mending pearl is really the nemesis of the devil race, we can quickly resolve the crisis of Wuxia City. The hundreds of thousands of people in Wuxia City can finally be saved. Not only the people of Wuxia City, but also the people of the 100 cities in the central state can finally escape the shadow of the devil goo. Ji Tianqing understood Yun Yao very well. He knew that she cared about the people and had already guessed that she would have such a reaction. Because he and Yun Yao had many similarities. This was also one of the reasons why they loved each other deeply, cherished and relied on each other. He held Yun Yao's hands and said with a solemn tone, Yao Yao, if the heaven-mending pearl is really the nemesis of the devil race, then of course everyone will be happy. We will have a way to deal with the devil goo. But this is only my guess. I need your help to verify my guess. Yun Yao quickly asked, how can I help you? Ji Tianqing said with a solemn expression, didn't you catch a lot of suspicious people and lock them in the dungeon of the city lord's mansion? Yun Yao nodded and said, that's right. Those 100 or so people are all suspicious. But we can't determine who is the devil race in disguise, so we can only lock them up. The truth is that among those 100 or so people, there are really some devil race in disguise. Ever since I ordered those people to be locked up, there are no more devil race sowing devil goo in the city. Ji Tianqing revealed a playful smile and said, all right, take me to the dungeon now. I want to see those people. If the heaven-mending pearl is really the nemesis of the devil race, maybe we can tell who is the devil race. Yun Yao revealed an expectant expression and nodded repeatedly, that's reasonable. We can't tell who is the devil race in disguise, but the heaven-mending pearl can. After we caught those 100 or so suspects, many of their family members and friends came to the city lord's mansion every day to plead for mercy, asking the city lord's mansion to release their loved ones. But most of those people are the rich and powerful families in the city. City Lord Yi has to deal with those people every day, so he has long been annoyed and exhausted. Tianqing, if you can tell who is innocent and who is the devil race, that would be great. After saying that, Yunyao brought Ji Tianqing out of the study and walked towards the backyard of the city lord's mansion. In the spacious but cold backyard, it seemed to be defenseless, but in fact, there were many hidden sentries. The entrance to the dungeon was under a stone sculpture in the corner of the backyard, protected by the Tianyuan array. Yunyao used a secret technique to open the array. A crack suddenly appeared on the base of the stone sculpture, and a door opened. Behind the stone door was a dark passageway that led to the dungeon deep in the ground. Yunyao brought Ji Tianqing through the stone door and walked down the stone stairs. After a quarter of an hour, the two people walked to the end of the passage and entered the dungeon. The city lord's mansion's dungeon was very large, like an underground palace, divided into upper and lower levels. Each level had 2 passageways. On both sides of the passageways were rows of prison cells. The entrance to the dungeon and each passageway were heavily guarded. The security was very tight. Furthermore, the entire dungeon was protected by the Tianyuan array. Even if there was an earthquake or powerhouses fighting, it was impossible to destroy the dungeon. Chapter 859. More than 100 suspects were locked up on the first floor of the dungeon. There were 200 cells on the first floor of the dungeon, and they were almost all occupied by these people. Ji Tianqing wanted to check the people in each cell one by one. He wouldn't wrongly accuse an innocent person, but he wouldn't let go of a single devil either. He brought Yunyao and the guard commander along the passage and started to check. The guard commander opened the door of the first cell. He stepped into the cell first and looked at the imprisoned person with a dignified gaze. In the cold and dark cell, there was a young man wearing a long brocade robe. He was chained to the wall with cold iron chains, and his hands and feet were shackled. This person had been imprisoned for half a month. His mental state was a little sluggish, and his emotions were very agitated. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Yunyao enter the secret cell, this person immediately struggled and shouted with an urgent tone, "Master, I'm innocent. Let me go, I beg you, let me go quickly." Yunyao was silent and didn't say anything. She quietly looked at Ji Tianqing and waited for his answer. Ji Tianqing stared at the young man expressionlessly. He used the pure heart Dharma eye to check his aura and used the power of the heaven-mending orb to observe his soul. This person's aura was normal, and his soul didn't have any abnormalities. The heaven-mending orb also didn't have any abnormal reaction. Therefore, Ji Tianqing brought Yunyao and the guard commander away and entered the second cell. The person imprisoned in this cell was a middle-aged man. Ji Tianqing carefully observed for a while and didn't find any abnormalities. Then, he checked the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th cells one after another. The people imprisoned in each cell were different. There were old and young, men and women, aristocrats and commoners. But when they saw Ji Tianqing and Yunyao, they would emotionally shout that they were innocent, or cry and beg for mercy. Ji Tianqing used the pure heart Dharma eye to observe while using the heaven-mending orb to check their souls. However, he did not find anything unusual even after checking the people in a few cells. Yunyao was a little worried and secretly transmitted her voice to him, "Tianqing, could it be that the devil race's disguise technique is so brilliant that even the heaven-mending bead can't see through it? Or is it that the heaven-mending pearl can only sense the aura of demonic insects, but not the aura of devils?" Ji Tianqing did not bat an eyelid. He calmly comforted her, "Yao Yao, don't worry. There are more than 100 people in the prison, and only a few of them are demons in disguise. Be patient and wait, I believe the heaven-mending orb will not disappoint us. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The guard commander opened 24 cells in a row, and Ji Tianqing also checked 24 suspects in a row. In the end, everyone was normal and no abnormalities were found. When Ji Tianqing stepped into the 25th cell, an inexplicable feeling rose in his heart. In this dark and gloomy cell, there was a middle-aged man dressed in a sapphire blue robe, dressed like a wealthy merchant. This person had oily hair and a powdered face. He was stout and had a few precious gemstone rings on his fingers. He looked quite noble. Even though he was chained up with cold iron chains and his hands and feet were shackled, he did not look disheveled at all. He looked very calm and graceful. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Yunyao enter the cell, this person did not cry or beg for mercy. He calmly said, "Two sirs, I have already said it countless times. This one is a merchant through and through. I have always been doing business honestly. It is impossible for me to have anything to do with the devil race. Two sirs, you have already locked me up for so long. How are you going to deal with me? You have to give me an explanation, right? This one still has a wife and children to take care of." The middle-aged merchant's bearing was calm and steady. He was not anxious at all. His words were also very pertinent, making people not doubt him at all. However, after Ji Tianqing observed him for a moment, his eyes suddenly flashed with a bright light. The corner of his mouth hooked up into a cold smile. "How can a beast like you, who is worse than a pig and a dog, be worthy of a wife and children?" When his cold laughter sounded, Yunyao was startled for a moment, but she immediately understood what he meant. The middle-aged merchant's body stiffened. His face was immediately filled with anger. He angrily shouted, "This sire, no matter who you are, you should not insult me like this. I am a cloth merchant in the city. Everyone in the streets and alleys knows my background. How can you accuse me of nothing? No matter who you are, if you want to slander me, you have to show evidence. Otherwise, I want to see the city lord and let city lord Yi be the judge." Seeing him refute with such righteous words, Ji Tianqing's cold smile deepened. The guard leader hesitated for a moment, then whispered to Ji Tianqing, "Young Master Ji, this is the cloth merchant, Lord Du. He is a famous philanthropist in our city. Every year, he gives out porridge and food to the poor people in the villages and towns. Moreover, Lord Du and City Lord Yi are old friends. He has donated a lot of food and money to the City Lord Manor. You see." The guard leader's words were obviously reminding Ji Tianqing that this Lord Du was a good person. He should not wrongly accuse him. Moreover, Lord Du and City Lord Yi were good friends. He hoped that Ji Tianqing would give City Lord Yi some face and not embarrass Lord Du too much. Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at the guard leader. With a smile that was not a smile, he said, "So, you are pleading for him? Or, do you want to guarantee his innocence?" This subordinate does not dare. The guard leader was shocked. He knelt down in fear and trepidation, afraid that Ji Tianqing would offend him. Ji Tianqing ignored him and looked straight at Lord Du. He sneered, "He, the demon clan's methods are getting better and better. Your acting skills are really amazing. However, this is useless in front of me. You want me to show evidence? Fine." As his voice fell, he stepped in front of Lord Du and suddenly stretched out his right hand. Swoosh! He activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl and released a mysterious white light that enveloped Lord Du's body. Instantly, Lord Du was wrapped tightly in the white light. The mysterious white light surged like a rising flame, releasing a mysterious and powerful force. Lord Du's entire body trembled. His brows furrowed and he let out a painful groan. He growled, "Brat, what are you trying to do? You have no evidence at all and slandered me. You even dare to use torture on me." Ji Tianqing did not speak. He moved his right hand to control the mysterious white light and purify Lord Du's body. Instantly, Lord Du's body changed and actually started to twist and contort. His clothes were normal but his body looked like it was being roasted. It was purplish-black and emitted wisps of black fog. That rising black fog was not unfamiliar to everyone. It was the demonic chi unique to the demon clan. When the demonic chi continuously appeared, Lord Du's body twitched and contorted as he let out heart-wrenching screams. In just a few breaths, his body began to crack and expand, growing to a height of more than 3 meters. In the blink of an eye, he turned from a pot-bellied human man into a 3-meter-tall demon clan man with a purplish-black body. No matter how miraculous his disguise was or how deeply he hid the demon clan's true body, it could not resist the purification of the heaven-mending pearl. Under the sacred white light, his demonic chi was quickly purified and he immediately revealed his true appearance. When Yunyao saw this, her clear eyes revealed a gratified smile. Reality proved that Ji Tianqing's guess was right. The heaven-mending pearl was really the demon clan's nemesis. When the guard commander saw this, he was instantly dumbfounded. When he regained his senses, he was so scared that his face was pale and he was sweating profusely. He knelt on the ground and hurriedly kowtowed to Ji Tianqing to beg for mercy. "Please forgive me, young Master Ji." This subordinate was confused for a moment. "Please spare my life." Chapter 860. The guard leader kowtowed like he was pounding garlic, scared out of his wits. He was just defending and pleading for mercy for old Master Du, but in the blink of an eye, old Master Du had revealed his true form and turned into a ferocious demon. If Ji Tianqing charged him with the crime of being an accomplice of the demon race, it would not be a problem to execute him on the spot. However, Ji Tianqing ignored him and continued to control the sacred white light to purify the demon race man's demon chi. "Ah! Ji Tianqing! You lowly reptile, bastard! You will die a horrible death. You dare to go against His Majesty the Demon Emperor, you will die without a doubt. Your death is coming soon." The demon race man screamed at the top of his lungs and let out an angry roar. He struggled with all his might, and the cold iron chains on his body and the shackles on his hands and feet were all rattled by him. The sturdy and tough iron chains began to twist and deform, and were about to break. However, the demon race man was wrapped in the sacred white light, and no matter how hard he struggled, it was useless. The demon chi in his body surged out wildly, and his flesh and blood burned, quickly evaporating into nothingness. In a short span of 20 breaths, he was completely purified by the sacred white light, and disappeared without a trace, not even a trace of powder was left. Silence returned to the prison cell. Ji Tianqing kept the sacred white light back into the heaven-mending pearl, and turned to look at Yun Yao, and said with some emotion, "Yao Yao, fortunately, after you came to Yuejian City, you implemented all kinds of strict measures. The demon race is too cunning, just like this old Master Du, he was taken over by the demon race not long ago. But he hid too well, and even City Lord Yi was deceived. I'm afraid no one in the entire Yuejian City can see through him. If you didn't give the order to capture him, City Lord Yi wouldn't have been able to capture this person, and this person is still planting demon insects in the city." Yun Yao nodded, and said with a solemn expression, "That's right, we can only blame the demon race for being too despicable, too vicious, and impossible to guard against. Fortunately, you came to help me, Yuejian City is saved." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and led her and the guard commander out of the cell. He then continued to examine the remaining suspects. 4 hours later, Ji Tianqing checked the remaining 100 or so suspects one by one. Most of the people were innocent, but he still found out that 4 people were disguised as demons. When he approached the disguised devil, the heaven-mending orb would have an abnormal reaction. He only needed to activate the power of the heaven-mending orb and use the sacred white light to envelop the demons. Then, he would be able to break through the demons' disguise and completely purify them. After he finished inspecting everyone, Yun Yao ordered the guard commander to release the remaining 100 or so innocent people. The leader of the guards hurriedly carried out the order. He led the guards to open one cell after another and unlocked the chains and shackles of the innocent prisoners. Immediately, the dungeon erupted into cheers. Countless people were crying tears of joy and gratitude. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao left the dungeon and returned to the city lord's residence. As soon as the two of them returned to their residence, a guard hurriedly came to report the news. Reporting to young Master Ji, young Lady Yun, the city lord has an urgent matter to discuss with you. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a dignified expression, bring him to the study. The guard hurriedly retreated to pass on the news. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had just sat down in the study when City Lord Yi entered the study with an anxious expression and bowed. Greetings to young Master Ji. Greetings to young Lady Yun, this subordinate has an urgent matter to report. Yun Yao nodded slightly and said with a calm expression, City Lord Yi, what's the matter that makes you so anxious? City Lord Yi hurriedly reported the truth, young Lady Yun, this subordinate just received news that last night, an expert invaded Moonfall Town. I don't know who fought near Moonfall Town and destroyed a mountain in the east of the town. The city guards stationed in Moonfall Town found the remains of the demons in the ruins, as well as many corpses. Hearing this, Yun Yao and Ji Tianqing looked at each other and revealed a knowing expression. Yun Yao raised her hand slightly and signaled City Lord Yi to stop. City Lord Yi, there's no need to say any more. I already knew about this. Last night, young Master Ji used a secret technique and predicted that Moonfall Town was in danger, so he rushed over to investigate the situation. Young Master Ji found a demonic parasite puppet in the town that was robbing young martial artists to devour their flesh and soul, so he started chasing after it. The mountain in the east of the town was destroyed because young Master Ji killed the demonic parasite puppet, so there's no need to make a fuss. That demonic parasite puppet was one of the 3 puppets that had been hiding outside the town, and it was very powerful. However, that demonic parasite puppet was already killed by young Master Ji, and the young martial artists were also rescued by young Master Ji. City Lord Yi was stunned on the spot. He looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief, and his eyes were filled with excitement and admiration. Young Master Ji actually predicted that Moonfall Town would be in danger. Heavens, that's too unbelievable. That demonic parasite puppet had been on the run for a long time, and its strength had already evolved to become extremely powerful. Back then, young Master Yun Yao and her subordinates worked together, and even led a large group of elite experts, but they still couldn't capture it. Young Master Ji, you're simply invincible and unparalleled. It's really a blessing for me and the people of Moonfall Town to have you in charge. You're the savior of Moonfall Town. City Lord Ye's strength had reached the 4th level of Sky Origin stage, and he was also a powerhouse that had been famous for decades. However, he and Yun Yao worked together, but they still couldn't capture that demonic parasite puppet. Instead, that demonic parasite puppet slaughtered a large group of guards, and they had to flee in the end. He knew very well how powerful the evolved demonic parasite puppet was. That was why he was so shocked when he heard that Ji Tianqing had taken care of that demonic parasite puppet so easily. He had been troubled by this for half a month, and Ji Tianqing had found that demonic parasite puppet on the first day of his arrival in Moonfall Town, and easily killed it. How could he believe this? If Yun Yao hadn't said it herself, he wouldn't have believed it at all. Ji Tianqing was so flattered and worshipped by City Lord Yi, but he was neither arrogant nor impatient. He calmly waved his hand and said, City Lord Yi, it's still too early to talk about this. If we really want to solve the crisis of Moonfall Town, we have to find the other 2 demonic parasite puppets as soon as possible and get rid of them. Moreover, after dealing with those 2 demonic parasite puppets, Moonfall Town must continue to be under martial law, and strictly prevent the demonic parasite clan from sneaking into the town and continuing to sow demonic parasites. City Lord Yi hurriedly nodded in agreement. Young Master Ji is right. This subordinate will do his best to protect Moonfall Town as ordered. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, gave him a few words of encouragement, and let him leave. After that, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to their rooms to rest. Moonfall Town was peaceful for the entire day. Ji Tianqing didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and had been meditating in his room the whole time. It wasn't until late at night that he suddenly sensed that the heaven-mending orb in his mind had a reaction. It lit up with a dense white light, and a warm feeling came from it. Another demonic parasite puppet has appeared, just in time. Chapter 861. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing left the city lord's mansion and flew into the night sky, rushing north as fast as lightning. The heaven-mending orb in his mind faintly emitted a mysterious response, guiding him to the north. With last night's experience, he could naturally guess that there must be a demonic venomous insect puppet causing trouble somewhere in the north of Yujian City. Not long after, he flew out of Yujian City and flew towards the mountains in the north. There were many villages and small towns scattered among the rolling mountains. Under the curtain of night, the mountains were like sleeping dragons lying on the ground. The mountains were quiet and gloomy. Only some villages and small towns were lit up with starry lights. Ji Tianqing flew continuously for an hour, crossing over a dozen villages and 2 small towns before entering the depths of the mountains. The warm feeling in his mind became more and more intense, and the reaction of the heaven-mending orb also gradually intensified. It was clear that he was getting closer and closer to the scene of the incident. After a quarter of an hour, when he crossed over a mountain, he saw a low slope behind the mountain. There was a small village on the slope, situated between the mountains and lush forests. This village that occupied half of the slope was originally a place of beautiful scenery with birds chirping and flowers blooming. It was as peaceful as a paradise. However, at this moment, the village was in a hubbub of voices. Flames were burning everywhere, and heart-wrenching screams and shouts could be heard. Hundreds of figures were running around the village in a panic. They were either running for their lives or calling for help. There were also many commoners who took out their weapons and gathered together, shouting as they rushed towards the center of the village. Ji Tianqing stood in the sky above the village, and after looking around, he clearly saw the situation in the village. There was a middle-aged man in a blood-red robe leading 2 strong men in armor. They were rampaging through the village, crazily slaughtering the commoners. Their strength was not ordinary. Their figures shuttled back and forth as fast as lightning, constantly swinging their weapons and chopping the weak villagers to the ground. Miserable screams were constantly heard, and dark red blood splattered in the night sky. It was a ghastly sight under the illumination of the flames. After the 3 crazy executioners slaughtered the people, they opened their mouths and spat out dark red blood mist, which covered the corpses on the ground. In the blink of an eye, the flesh and blood of those miserable corpses melted and disintegrated, turning into white skeletons. There was no doubt that the 3 executioners who were wantonly slaughtering were the puppets that had been poisoned by the demonic goo. The red-robed man was the leader of the group. He was at the sky origin stage. The 2 armored puppets seemed to be his subordinates and were only at the origin core realm. However, the people in the village were all weak in martial arts, and there wasn't even a Yuan Dan expert. In front of the 3 demonic goo puppets, the thousands of villagers were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. In just 10 breaths of time, more than 100 civilians were slaughtered. Their flesh, blood, and souls were devoured and turned into skeletons. The remaining citizens were scared out of their wits. They no longer dared to resist and fled in all directions. However, they simply could not escape the slaughter of the 3 demonic venomous puppets. Especially the red-robed man. With a wave of his hand, he sent out a blood light that covered the sky and earth, destroying several houses and buildings into ruins. The civilians who could not escape in time were instantly minced into meat paste by the blood light and scattered among the ruins. The pungent smell of blood filled the night sky. An atmosphere of fear and despair enveloped the entire village. Ji Tianqing saw the scene in the village clearly and immediately looked coldly at the red-robed man. He could tell that the red-robed man was an evolved demonic goo puppet. Not only was he powerful, but he was also very intelligent. The two armored demonic goo puppets were most likely new puppets created after the demonic goo in the red-robed man's body split apart. Damned bastards, death is not to be regretted. Ji Tianqing bellowed with a murderous aura. He immediately waved his hand and shot out two golden sword lights towards the two armored puppets. Swoosh! Swoosh! The two demonic goo puppets were brandishing their swords and sabers, slashing more than a dozen civilians to the ground and devouring their flesh and souls. The golden sword beams suddenly slashed through the dark night sky and erupted with unparalleled sharpness. Before the two demonic goo puppets could react, they were hit by the golden sword beams. With two muffled bangs, the two of them were sent flying by the golden sword light. Their bodies exploded with a bang, exploding into countless pieces. Two deep pits were also blasted into the ground by the sword beams, splashing mud all over the sky. After Ji Tianqing killed the two demonic goo puppets in one move, he turned his head to look at the red-robed man. However, the two demonic goo puppets that had been blasted into pieces were not dead yet. The two of them turned into two black mists and quickly flew towards the red-robed man. The red-robed man immediately stopped killing and looked up at Ji Tianqing in the sky. When he saw Ji Tianqing flapping his golden wings and standing in the sky with a cold expression, he immediately narrowed his eyes and revealed a fearful expression. Ji Tianqing also saw his appearance clearly. His eyes were scarlet like fire, his skin was dark purple, and his wide mouth was stained with blood. He looked like a ferocious demon. Without a doubt, this was the evolved demonic goo puppet, a cruel and cunning demon. Demon, die! Ji Tianqing shouted in a low voice. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and shot out a huge flaming sword light towards the red-robed man. Crimson Dragon Flash. The 10-meter-long flaming sword soared with intense flames like a flaming divine dragon with extremely violent power. In an instant, the crimson dragon flash descended from the sky and arrived in front of the red-robed man, about to drown his figure. His expression suddenly changed, and he retreated as fast as lightning. Moreover, he also controlled the two black mists to block the crimson dragon flash's attack head-on. Boom! With a loud bang, the crimson dragon flash blasted the two demonic mists and completely dissipated them. A 100-meter-wide crater was also blasted out on the ground, splashing dust and flames into the sky. The two ordinary puppets were completely destroyed, but the red-robed man escaped the disaster. He took the opportunity to escape from the village. His whole body was covered in bloody flames as he flew into the sky and fled into the depths of the mountains. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing frowned and a cold murderous intent flashed in his eyes. This demonic goo puppet is stronger than the one last night, and more cunning and vicious. However, don't even think about escaping tonight. You'll definitely die. He whispered in a low voice and immediately turned into a golden flame, like a meteor streaking across the night sky, chasing after the red-robed man. After a while, the two of them were far away from the village and entered the depths of the mountains. There were mountains in a radius of dozens of miles, and there was no one nearby. This area was just right for fighting. Ji Tianqing suddenly sped up and quickly closed the distance between him and the red-robed man. Golden light gushed out from his body and condensed into a 100-meter-long heaven-splitting sword. It transformed into a white tiger phantom and fiercely attacked the red-robed man. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.